Shahida Othman, welcome to CNA's special coverage of Singapore Budget 2025. In just under half an hour, Singapore Prime Minister Lawrence Wong, in his capacity as Finance Minister, will deliver the budget statement. The government's spending priorities will unfold against the backdrop of SG60, the nation's milestone 60th anniversary, and also an upcoming general election. We are expecting measures to address immediate needs like the cost of living, alongside a longer-term vision to boost the country's competitiveness on the world stage. We have reporters at Parliament House and experts here in the studio to tell us what this means for Singapore and Singaporeans. And here with us this afternoon, Selina Ling, Chief Economist and Head of Global Markets Research and Strategy at OCBC, and Dr. Woo Jun Jie, Senior Lecturer from Lee Kuan Yew School of Public Policy at the National University of Singapore. Our reporters are also at Parliament House. Sabrina Ng and Risha Matthew will get us reactions from members of the House after the speech. But first, let's hear from Sabrina on the significance of this year's budget.
This budget will be one to watch as Singapore's GDP performed better than expected last year. There's also a projected government surplus from the 2024 fiscal year. Now, this excess could be returned to the country's reserves as this year marks the final term for the current government. Either that or Prime Minister Lawrence Wong could decide to give out this government surplus in the form of more generous support at this year's budget. For context, Mr. Wong, who is also the Finance Minister, had said he would be addressing immediate concerns, such as the cost of living and job security. He has also called this budget a budget for all Singaporeans. Putting all that together might mean bigger handouts in the form of grocery vouchers or utility rebates, or one-off support for certain businesses. This budget is also the last one before the country heads into a general election to be held by November. And if we look back at previous year's budgets, which coincided with GE's in 2006 and 2011, there were generous cash handouts of up to $800 in the form of what's called growth dividends under previous finance ministers. Some experts are looking to see if something similar could be announced this year, especially for the broad middle class. Another highlight is that 2025 marks 60 years of nationhood, also known as SG60. So we're anticipating announcements to mark this milestone. If the 2015 Golden Jubilee budget is anything to go by, it could mean more support measures to support unity, identity, and that includes more tax donations for charitable donations.
And that was Sabrina Ng with a preview on what we could likely expect from the upcoming budget. Now let's bring our guests into the conversation. Ms. Ling, let's begin with you. Some are calling this an election budget, an SG60 budget. It is a big year for Singapore and Singaporeans, and it is also Lawrence Wong's first budget as Prime Minister. Given all these factors, what do you think would be Mr. Wong's immediate and shorter-term priorities for Budget 2025?
Well, I think this is going to be a very significant budget for all the reasons that you have mentioned, but I think it's also a good platform for him to basically lay out his vision for the Singapore economy going forward and for Singaporean society in general. So I think the short-term sweeteners, being pre-election budget, and given that we've got a very big bumper fiscal surplus from last year, you will probably get a lot of goodies in the form of, CDC vouchers and possibly, SG60 cash bonus and the likes of it. But I think beyond that, structurally, we are facing a lot of challenges, right? We have a very polarized economy in the world right now because a lot of the Trump tariffs are coming into play. So Singapore, as a small open economy, is vulnerable. And I think there will be a lot of questions about, what is the economic strategy for Singapore going forward. So beyond just, handling immediate day-to-day concerns about cost of living, helping SMEs, helping the businesses to restructure and reposition themselves for growth, the medium-term drivers, things like how do we embrace AI, how do we continue to help our local companies, move abroad, internationalize, and take advantage of some of these, factors. I think that will be key. And we also are going through a green transition, so how to help our companies and Singapore households to adapt to this changing environment. So a lot of things in play right now. Yeah. So it will be a very important budget for him to address both short-term concerns but also longer-term competitive strategies.
Singapore is indeed in a unique position right now. Dr. Wu, what do you think would be the focus areas of Mr. Wong's budget this year?
I think there will be a key focus on the pressures that we're facing right now, cost of living for families. And I think beyond just the support that we can give them, though of course there'll be questions on how these different segments of society can receive the kind of support that they need. Besides cost of living, I think Selena has mentioned the structural issues that we face, both in the economy, in the increasingly volatile global situation as well. So helping people to adapt to that situation, become more resilient, to upskill, to be more prepared for potential economic instabilities is another theme that we can see going forward.
So there are the short-term sweeteners, as you mentioned, Ms. Ling, and also the long-term structural reforms. We'll be keeping a lookout for those things. But this is essentially the last policy-making opportunity for the government to introduce meaningful change on the ground before the election. So how substantial or generous do you think the measures would be for Singaporeans, Dr. Wu?
I think it's going to be quite substantial, partly because of the reasons you've mentioned, but also partly because the needs of people, the economy are quite huge at this point in time. Besides the things we've talked about, cost of living, there's also the tiny issue of family formation, fertility, all these very long-term issues that we do need to tackle, or rather begin tackling at this point in time. So I think the measures are going to be quite substantial in order to put us on a good footing to address these issues in the longer term.
Ms. Ling, do you agree with that?
Well, I think if you look at the way the Singapore government has always taken each budget, there is very long-term planning involved, right? So it's not planning on a year-to-year basis. A lot of the reforms and the policy directions have already put in place. I think it's a question of how they're going to potentially enhance some of these incentives and measures to, basically get the Singapore environment and the economy on the right track. So I think it's a little bit more on, stepping up the pace of the reforms rather than taking a completely new direction per se. I think it's also a chance for the 4G leadership, to show how is their style and their aspirations slightly different from the old leadership. So I think it will be very, very challenging.
All right, we've been talking about the cost of living. If we can bring up this inflation line graph here, looking at the trends of inflation. Let's see now. Looking at this trend here, the rate of increase is starting to slow down. It is expected to ease further this year as well. But despite this, as you mentioned, Ms. Ling, some businesses are still struggling to cope. Which sectors or types of firms would require that extra boost, that extra government support?
Well, we see a lot of the domestically oriented firms, especially the SMEs, reporting that they face challenges on multiple fronts. So manpower cost is one issue for them because wages have been going up at double digits for many of these industries. So these would include things like your F&B services, your healthcare, your early childhood education, even things like your land transport and other local industries that actually employ local workers. But it's not just manpower, it's also the other business costs, right? Okay. So it's your rentals and your other operating costs that have basically cumulatively contributed to a very high cost structure. And I think this is something that the SMEs continue to grapple with. And then if you look at the overall external environment, it still remains very challenging. There's this US-China trade war that's ongoing, and the US is now talking about reciprocal tariffs across the board. So it is a very uncertain world. There's a lot of supply chain recalibration that's taking place. And as businesses try to make themselves more resilient by trying to find alternative suppliers and ecosystems, that also means structurally inflation could be higher in the medium term.
In this uncertain world that we're talking about here, Singaporeans are still feeling the effects of lingering inflation during the COVID-19 years. And those in the lower income groups, they are particularly feeling the impact more strongly. How far would the government's cushioning measures go in supporting Singaporeans across all the different stages of life?
I think traditionally the lower income has received substantial support from the government, given that they are in a relatively vulnerable position. But I think going forward, I think we are starting to see that middle income families are also facing pressures from cost of living, or what we call the sandwich class, where they have to provide for the children, provide for the elderly. So I think there will be possibly some thought into how to support all segments of society, the low income have been well taken care of, but the middle income is something that perhaps they will need a little bit more support going forward.
Where do you think would be the focus or priority between long-term policy reforms and immediate cash incentives?
I think there is going to be a difficult balance to strike at all times, given that resources are always limited in Singapore. So the short-term needs are indeed quite heightened at this point in time with the high cost of living. But long-term strategic needs, as Selena has mentioned, are also very important for Singapore. So I think it's striking a balance between the two rather than over-prioritizing one or the other.
Ms. Lee?
So I think the worst for inflation is probably over. Inflation rates are coming down, and if you look at the MAS forecast, core inflation is probably going to be in the range of 1 to 2%. But that said, if you look at the quintiles, of the households that are facing inflation, it's quite obvious that the lowest quintile is still facing relatively higher inflation compared to the upper income ones. And then if you look at what's driving inflation, it's really your essentials. You'll be things like your accommodation, your food, your healthcare, and also your public transport and point-to-point transport. So these are, the bulk, almost 70% of the CPI basket. So for the men on the street, they are very, very sensitized to some of these movements. Prices haven't come down, they're just going up at a slower rate. So I think there will be quite a fair bit of policy focus on how to offset or mitigate some of these price increases.
But real household income is increasing, and with inflation somewhat slowing down in a way, realistically, what is the income threshold that households will need to comfortably cope with given the current inflationary pressures?
Well, I wouldn't fixate too much on an absolute level per se. I think it's important to see that medium income growth over time has continued to keep pace, if not outstrip inflation. So I know that basically during the COVID pandemic, that's a little bit of unusual circumstances where inflation went through the roof. But I think generally for this year, if core inflation is rising about 1 to 2%, headline about 1.5 to 2.5%, if we see nominal wage growth 2+% or more, I think generally that means that households' income is keeping pace with inflation. So of course that is in general. It doesn't apply to a person who is displaced from a job or a sandwich class where you're getting pressures from both the dependents on the young children and also the elderly. So there are some specific circumstances, I think, where additional fiscal help may be needed.
With this increased consumer spending, Dr. Wu, would that also drive rising wage expectations as employees, they strive to keep pace with the rising living costs?
Well, inevitably, when living costs do go up or remain sticky at a high level, it does put expectations on citizens that they hope, certainly they hope that the wages are increasing in tandem, which they have been. So I don't think that will be a huge issue for the citizens. Of course, as mentioned, for the man on the street, the perception of price increases may take a little bit longer to go away because prices do remain sticky. They don't come down immediately, even if inflation sort of tapers off.
All right, cost of living always on top of people's minds, and all eyes are also on what the government will prioritize, from securing jobs to keeping the economy thriving. Prime Minister Lawrence Wong has arrived at Parliament House, and it won't be long before we find out about the government's spending plans for the year. We are counting down to Singapore Budget 2025, and we'll bring you that address live as it happens. Do stay with us.
Two countries, one vision. A cross-border ecosystem to drive global investments and economic growth.
The key really is we have to go for a win-win outcome.
A strategic location in southern Malaysia.
We have the resources, we have the land, we have the people.
The opportunities and challenges shaping the Johor-Singapore Special Economic Zone. Wednesday on CNA.
In 2025, I will be the same age as Singapore. We will both be 60 years old.
60. It's more than just a number. It's a crossroads.
What am I going to do now? What have I done? Have I done enough?
I'm going on a journey to uncover what comes next.
皆さん、年だからできないんじゃなくて、年だからできることって必ずあると思うんで。
Seva is very important because we do something for others without expecting. They will do for no expectations.
It's so important for us to come out and meet friends and just to clear our minds.
Because life doesn't slow down at 60. It begins.
60岁还是很年轻，还很多时间。Me
I think at any age you can reinvent yourself.
enjoy
Enjoy!
Born in 1965, two-part series, premieres 1st and 2nd March on CNA.
A great night's sleep can make all the difference. It can be the difference between having dreams and making them come true. A great night's sleep, night after night after night. That is the difference. The difference is temper.
A mosque that withstood nature's wrath.
Tuhan mau menunjukkan kekuasaannya. Mungkin nih kita perlu kembali ke hati nurani.
A miracle baby.
I couldn't find my daughter. The wave damaged everything. After 1 hour, and the Indonesian workers, they're shouting to me, the baby on the mattress.
The world coming together to help communities in need.
It speaks well of humanity, that really when crisis happens, that's when we all show our true colors.
Stories of hope in the wake of the 2004 tsunami. 20 years on, some victims are still grappling with grief. Others are marching forward with newfound strength. Catch the waves that changed us on demand at cna.asia.
Welcome back. You are watching CNA's special coverage of Singapore Budget 2025. We are just a few minutes away from Finance Minister Lawrence Wong's budget speech, and we will bring it to you live here on CNA and on CNA 938. Now, Mr. Wong has said that the budget today continues to implement the Forward Singapore exercise. To tell us more about what that means and possible topics in the speech, we have Risha Matthew from Parliament House.
One thing Prime Minister has said about this year's budget is that it's won by Singaporeans. What that means is that the longer-term issues tackled during budget this year came from the Forward Singapore exercise. That's the nationwide feedback sessions with over 200,000 people between 2022 and 2023. The main aim is to review and refresh Singapore's social compact. Several policy shifts over the next decade were identified. Some of these include more help for job seekers, broadening the definition of merit, support families at all stages of life, and climate resilience. The so-called first installment of these took shape in last year's budget. At that time, Mr. Wong promised an almost $40 billion investment over the decade for Forward Singapore. This year, the budget is focused on 4 broad themes: economic strategies for the next bound, opportunities for skills upgrading and jobs for workers, support for Singaporeans from all stages of life, strengthening Singaporeans' sense of solidarity and unity. These came up during Mr. Wong's engagements with the public and walkabouts. So it seems the government is looking further ahead and funneling money for longer-term concerns. One thing we're looking out for is a targeted support scheme, particularly for large families, which was hinted at the National Day rally last year. The ageing population and the sandwich group in the middle class, with dependents both young and old, might see more help as well. Another could be training incentives to help address job security fears as well as rapid technological disruptions to some industries. So we'll be keeping an eye out for announcements and measures to help with longer-term economic and social challenges.
And we heard there from Risha, our reporter, on some of the forward SG themes like helping job seekers, broadening the definition of merit, support families at all life stages, and this being the second installment of this movement. What are some of the major longer-term and structural issues or topics that we can expect to see today?
Well, we live in a VUCA world, so there's a lot of technologies that are disrupting jobs and companies, and I think there is some sense of insecurity when it comes to employment. And I think that this budget would be key to actually try and address how to better prepare Singaporean workers for all the changes that may come about. You know, that there is some resilience in the way that they prepare in terms of skill sets. We already had the Skills Future scheme. How more can we enhance the impetus and the urgency for Singaporean workers to upgrade? But that goes hand in hand, of course, with trying to support families, because the Singapore population is aging, right? So how to take care of people's retirement, medical, and general sense of economic security. I think those will be very, very important themes as well.
Dr. Wu, how prepared are we, Singaporeans, against this very uncertain climate?
Well, this is one of those issues that it takes a bit of time for people to really get adapted to this environment. As Selena has mentioned, it's a VUCA world, and it's increasingly VUCA by the year. In fact, every year you see different kinds of disruptions. So the long-term structural needs of Singapore, whether it's the economy, the resilience of the population, or support for the family, it is a little bit fluid. It does change over the years.
Okay, and PM Wong also reiterated in his Chinese New Year message that families are the bedrock of Singapore society, right? We've seen major policy moves in the past months or years to support families, from ramping up parental leave, from enhancing housing grants, as well as children's subsidies. What do you expect the large family scheme is going to look like?
Well,
Dr. Wu, perhaps, you can go first.
I think we've heard a lot from families, parents particularly, that perhaps things like childcare leave is not enough if you have many children, not just 1 or 2 children. And certainly in terms of financial support, they may need a little bit more than traditionally they've been given. So I think we could see some expanded support for larger families in terms of more childcare leave for families with more children, perhaps more policies to encourage people to not just to support them when they have children, but to encourage them to have more children, given our declining fertility.
Ms. Ling, what about you? How do you expect the large family support scheme to look like?
Well, I think this is really in response to our TFR dropping below 1. So I think that there is some consideration to basically have more bespoke type of support for large families. So the number of dependents you have, whether it's children or even the elderly parents, I think that will go some way to basically, giving some relief to the sandwich class. When they have concerns about early childcare, or it's not just an issue of cost per se. It's also a matter of the whole infrastructure and societal support. So I think it has to be quite multi-pronged. It's not just about giving parental leave or giving housing vouchers, but basically taking into account each step of the family planning to the family creation and the process as your family continues to mature. So I think we probably will see quite a nice pipeline of support coming out to basically help families through each of these stages.
Why has this become a priority for the government, though, at this point?
I think you put together the aging population and the fact that our TFR is at a record unprecedented low. The fact is that you have to have some balance in your economy and society. So you can very well take in, of course, some foreign talent, but there are some socio-economic issues to also manage in terms of that balance. So I think it would definitely make a lot of sense to try and focus on also growing the domestic population a little bit by helping families have an easier job in terms of procreation and in terms of bringing up children, because on parents' mind it's always about what is the financial cost and non-financial cost of bringing up a child.
All right, and on that note, PM Wong said at the 70th anniversary of CPF just a few weeks ago that the government will continue to improve and enhance the scheme very carefully to ensure that it can meet the retirement needs of Singaporeans. So are we expecting CPF reforms for seniors or the broad middle?
Well, actually, last year's budget, they already announced quite a fair bit of changes to the CPF, right, in terms of the enhanced retirement sum, the higher contribution rates for the older workers. So a fair bit has already been put in place. Okay. So from here, I think I'll wait and see what new things they can come out from the hat actually to try and, search. I think one area that they could possibly look at is, in terms of the investment returns to the CPF funds, because there is an issue about, if inflation is going to be rising faster than pre-COVID levels. How do we ensure that our retirement sum gets invested and the returns on this investment sum continues to outpace inflation going forward?
Dr. Wu, any expectations on this area?
Well, I'm inclined to agree that a lot has been done in the past year or two, so I don't see any major structural reforms going forward. But I do agree that there is a need to ensure that there's retirement adequacy, but also sufficient CPF monies to pay for housing. As you know, housing is another hot topic, and housing costs are going up slightly. So these are issues that somewhat get intertwined with CPF, given that many people fund their home ownership plans with CPF as well.
So actually on this issue, whether how much of your CPF retirement savings should be going into housing versus actually being put aside for your retirement, I think there has to be quite a fine balance.
And we will have to see if that happens today. One of the themes as well is economic strategies for the next bound and skills upgrading and jobs for workers. Now, these are very broad topics, right? Comparing this to the last budget, what do you think might change or a deepening?
Well, I think for sure the world is getting a lot more complicated with trade tariffs and with geopolitical uncertainties. So it's not an easy task to navigate, in this very, very complex world. But I think if we come back to basics, right, it's about getting foreign direct investments in, ensuring that your ecosystem is conducive to growth, to entrepreneurship, to innovation, to R&D. You grow your workforce, make sure that they have the right skill set to continue to adapt to new growth industries and skills requirements, ensuring that people feel included, and this could be in all walks of life, not just whether you're contributing economically to the Singapore society. I think all this have to go hand in hand to make sure that Singapore remains competitive and attractive. And
before the commercial break, we also heard from Sabrina that there is likely to be a budget surplus from last FY. Now, if we can pull up a chart here, it's going to appear very soon. That surplus came on the back of a huge deficit from FY 2023. There you go. What does it mean usually when the government has a surplus? How does that impact the budget? Dr. Wu, if I may pose this question to you.
Sure. When the government has a surplus, it means that for that particular FY, the revenues from the government is more than its expenditures, so there is money left over. To put it simply. And for the current budget, the implications are that the government may have a little bit more fiscal space to play with, to fund its programs, to provide for the measures that it's going to announce.
So basically we estimate that last year, due to very buoyant GST and also tax revenues, we basically have a lot of headroom for this budget to be a little bit more generous. So we do expect that the government will run a fiscal deficit because elections is probably going to happen fairly soon, and whatever is not spent within this term of government would basically go into the past reserves. So I think it makes sense at this very pivotal transition point to actually try and invest not only to meet the short-term needs, but also to position Singapore for the next 5 to 10 years.
But why does this normally take place in the last year of the term of government?
Well, it's just fiscal planning, right? When you first start out, you don't know what the economic circumstances are going to be for the next couple of years. So you tend to be a little bit cautious in terms of your spending and how much deficit you want to run in the earlier years of the term. But once you're getting towards the tail end, you have a very good sense of what the outcomes are going to be. So you will have, if you have, of course, if you have accumulated a substantial fiscal surplus, then you know that this is the amount of money that you have to play with.
So how do you think we are going to allocate the spending of resources this time around, given the past trends?
Well, I think if you look at the past budgets, typically what has become very substantial is the special transfers, and it almost matches what we're getting from the NIRC, right? So apart from the day-to-day, expenditure, the operating expenditures, what we're putting aside for really structural growth drivers, whether it's in terms of the AI fund, in terms of the, the various things that we want to do. Like for instance, in the past we had the Merdeka Pioneer and also the modular packages, all the top-ups that we're doing to the various funds. Those is also one big area where it's not just about the here and now, but it's also about preparing for the future.
All right. Now, we understand that Prime Minister and Finance Minister Lawrence Wong is about to deliver Singapore's 2025 budget statement. Let's take you live now to Parliament.
Mr. Speaker.
Order. Item 1, Budget Statement. A motion standing in the name of the Prime Minister and Minister for Finance.
Prime Minister and Minister for Finance.
Before I begin, Mr. Speaker, I should mention I'm a little under the weather. My voice may not sound like its normal voice, a little raspier, but I will do my best to get through the speech in one go, without a break.
If you do need a break, just let me know.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Speaker, I move that Parliament approve the financial policy of the government for the financial year 1st April 2025 to 31st March 2026. 2025 marks our 60th year of independence. It has been a remarkable journey, reflecting the grit and resilience of generations of Singaporeans in building our nation. 60 years ago, the world was very different. It was the height of the Cold War, with the Berlin Wall standing as a stark symbol of division between the United States and the Soviet Union. In Asia, the Cold War spilled over into proxy fights with devastating wars in Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia. As a fledgling nation, Singapore faced monumental challenges. Racial tensions were high. Unemployment was rampant. The withdrawal of British forces shortly after independence dealt a heavy blow to our defense and our economy. In a world divided by blocs, we had no hinterland and no natural allies. Survival seemed improbable. Yet in that crucible of fire, our pioneers forged the nation. We refused to be pawns in someone else's game. We turned our vulnerabilities into strength. We plugged into the world as an open and neutral hub for commerce and diplomacy. Together we defined our relevance to the world and built this nation. Today we face a new global contest. The stark divides of the Cold War have given way to a fragmented and troubled world. New wars are being erected, not of concrete, but in the form of economic and trade barriers. And once again, we will have to find ways to navigate a turbulent external environment. We have done well so far. We bounced back strongly from the COVID-19 pandemic and ended last year on a strong footing. Our economy grew by 4.4%. Inflation continued to ease. Singaporeans saw wage increases that outpaced inflation. The median income of resident workers rose by 3.4% above inflation. Income inequality after government taxes and transfers is at its lowest since 2000. All this has given us good momentum for our next phase. But we also expect greater global uncertainty and downside risk. The US and China are locked in a fierce contest for global supremacy. Neither side wants to come to blows, but both know that economic heft and technological prowess are key to winning this global race. And both are prepared to take more assertive actions to advance their own interests even at the expense of established international norms. So we can expect escalating attempts at containment and counter-containment with ripple effects that will inevitably draw in other countries, including Singapore. All these pressures will reshape the global economy and dampen prospects for global growth. As a small and open economy, we will feel the impact. For 2025, we expect a more moderate outlook. Growth is projected at 1 to 3%, while inflation is expected to average 1.5% to 2.5%. But despite the uncertainties, we can look ahead with a degree of confidence. Singapore today is far stronger than we were 60 years ago. We have developed a strong and well-diversified economy supported by a highly skilled workforce. We have built up a robust SAF and a strong diplomatic network to uphold our sovereignty and security. We have forged a common Singapore identity, grounded in our shared values and experiences and our commitment to one another and our nation. This is the legacy of generations of Singaporeans, with each one running a good race. The baton has now been passed, and it is our turn to take Singapore forward. This budget builds on previous budgets, not only to address today's challenges, but to plan ahead and secure Singapore's future. Budget 2025 is a budget for all Singaporeans. It's also a budget shaped together with all Singaporeans. It further advances our Forward Singapore agenda, which incorporates your aspirations and views and seeks to keep our society strong and united. In this budget, we will work with you to tackle cost pressures, advance our growth frontier, equip workers throughout life, build a sustainable city, nurture a caring and inclusive society, and rally as one united people. And I will go through each of these in turn. Let me start by addressing concerns over rising costs for both individuals and businesses. Global inflation rose sharply in 2022 following the outbreak of the war in Ukraine and remained high after that due to energy, food, and supply chain disruptions. Like many other countries, Singapore was impacted. That's why we've been providing additional support measures over the last 2 years to cushion the impact on Singaporeans. Last year, I enhanced the assurance package by $1.9 billion. The package has helped to fully offset the effects of inflation for lower-income households and to provide a significant cushion for middle-income households. We will continue to provide support for us as long as needed within our means. While inflation is expected to ease further this year, prices remain high. Singaporeans are still adjusting to these new price realities. Some have had to tighten their belts, rethink spending habits, or make difficult trade-offs to manage their expenses. Therefore, in this budget, I will provide additional support for Singaporeans. First, I will provide $800 in CDC vouchers to every Singaporean household. The first $500 will be disbursed in May this year, and the remaining $300 will be disbursed in January next year. As with previous CDC vouchers, the half can be used at participating supermarkets, and the other half can be used at participating heartland merchants and hawkers. Second, I will provide additional USAVE rebates to help households cope with their utilities expenses. Eligible HDB households will receive up to $760 this financial year. This is double the amount of regular USAVE rebates. It will cover about 6 months of utilities expenses for those living in 1- and 2-room flats, and 3 months of utilities expenses for those living in 3- and 4-room flats. Third, I will provide more support to families with children. They will receive $500 in Life SG credits for each Singaporean child aged 12 and below this year. These credits are the same as the Life SG credits we gave to national servicemen last year. And parents can use them to defray their household expenses. Every Singaporean aged 13 to 20 this year will also receive a $500 top-up to their EduSave account or their post-secondary education account. They can use this top-up to pay for their approved education-related expenses. More support will be extended to individuals and families who face greater financial stress. We will increase the rates for the ComCare assistance schemes to better support lower-income households with basic living expenses. For example, a one-person household on long-term assistance will receive an additional $120 each month, bringing the monthly cash assistance to $760. Those supported by short to medium-term assistance will also receive more than before, based on the household's composition, needs, and income. In tandem, we will increase the Singapore allowance, which is an ex gratia payment that some of our pensioners receive. It will increase from $350 to $390 each month to support those with smaller pensions. And the monthly pension ceiling will also increase to $1,320. Through the ComCare Interim Assistance Scheme, we will provide more support for community organizations as well to help households in need. We are also paying close attention to public housing. We have ramped up our BTO supply decisively. Application rates for BTO flats have stabilized and are now well below pre-COVID levels. We will continue with the robust supply pipeline. Over the next 3 years, MND will launch more than 50,000 new flats in a wide range of locations, including in Woodlands, Bayshore, and Mount Pleasant. Last year, more than 8 in 10 first-timer families who collected keys to their BTO flats were able to service their monthly mortgage loans with little or zero out-of-pocket cash. To put in perspective, this is a level of affordability that residents in other major cities like London, Sydney, and Hong Kong do not enjoy. But we have been able to achieve this in Singapore, and we will continue to keep public housing affordable and accessible for all. Some Singaporeans prefer resale flats as they have shorter waiting times, but they are understandably concerned about the higher prices of resale flats. Our cooling and supply measures will eventually help to stabilize the resale market. Meanwhile, we will offer more options to home seekers who want their flats sooner. This year, HDB will launch around 3,800 flats with a waiting time of less than 3 years. This is about 20% of the full year's BTO supply. And we will continue to increase the supply of such flats in the coming years. HDB also launched the largest ever sale of balance flats exercise last week, with around 5,500 flats available island-wide, and it plans to hold another balance flat exercise later this year. Higher prices also affect our businesses, many of whom are grappling with the higher cost of rent and labor. So I will introduce a 50% corporate income tax rebate in the year of assessment 2025. Not all companies are profitable and some may not benefit from such a rebate. So I will provide every active company that employed at least one local employee last year a minimum benefit of $2,000. The total benefit that each company will receive will be capped at $40,000. Despite facing higher cost pressures, I'm glad that many businesses remain committed to uplifting the wages of lower wage workers. The government will continue to share this responsibility with employers. And taking into account feedback from the employers, I will enhance the progressive wage credit scheme by increasing the government's co-funding levels for wage increases from 30% in 2025 to 40%. And from 15% in 2026 to 20%. The measures we have taken in recent years and are taking in this budget will help to mitigate the impact of rising costs. But in the longer term, the best way to adjust to higher prices is to grow the economy and increase productivity so that all Singaporeans can enjoy higher real incomes and better standards of living. And let me turn to our strategies next in these areas. We will take bold and decisive actions to advance our growth frontier. The Singapore economy now operates at a higher level, but we cannot afford to stand still. Global economic competition is intensifying, and many other countries and cities are pressing ahead. If we fail to stay competitive, we will be left behind. We must therefore redouble efforts to grow our economy and keep it dynamic and vibrant. Growth has a direct impact on the collective well-being of Singaporeans. Last year, our economy grew by more than 4%. This meant higher wages and real incomes for many, many workers. It will be hard to achieve 4% growth on a sustained basis. But if we can secure an average of 2 to 3% growth per annum over the next decade, we will be able to create better jobs and opportunities and improve standards of living for all Singaporeans. To achieve this, we must continue to uphold several fundamentals that includes maintaining sound monetary and fiscal policies, harnessing market forces to drive efficiency and innovation, staying open to people and ideas to strengthen our capabilities, and deepening our tripartite partnership as a cornerstone of economic stability. At the same time, our approach and strategy must adapt to changing circumstances. At this stage of development, we can no longer compete on cost alone. Instead, we must differentiate ourselves by producing high-value solutions for the world. To take our economy forward, this budget will emphasize 3 key areas: technology and innovation, our enterprise ecosystem, as well as our infrastructure investments amidst resource constraints. First, we will enhance our technology and innovation engines. This is crucial because new ideas, innovation, and technological progress are the drivers of growth. We see this in the US, where the technology sector, powered by Silicon Valley and companies like Apple, Amazon, Alphabet, and Tesla, has helped to propel the country's dynamism and innovation. We don't operate at the same scale as the US, but we can still excel in specific areas of innovation and technology. We have a new generation of local tech companies like Grab, Sea, and Razer, which have established themselves as regional or industry leaders. We are home to the world's top tech companies. They already have substantial activities here and are keen to do more out of Singapore, including in new frontier areas like artificial intelligence or AI and quantum computing. We also have considerable strengths in several industries. We are a key player in semiconductors, supplying more than 10% of the chips and producing 1/5 of semiconductor equipment worldwide. Just as silicon chips fuel the tech industry, DNA chips are unlocking new frontiers in life sciences. These chips enable scientists to sequence DNA, which can be used to diagnose diseases or identify patient risk. They demand high levels of precision engineering to implant millions of DNA strands onto a glass or silicon surface. Singapore alone produces more than 80% of the world's DNA chips. In fact, we are a keynote for the broader life sciences sector. 8 of the world's 10 pharmaceutical companies have manufacturing operations here. We are also a major producer of advanced medical devices, including cardiac implants and hearing aids. Take the example of American medtech company Illumina. It is the global leader in next-generation genetic sequencing instruments and DNA chips. Illumina has a strong footprint in Singapore. We serve at its Asia-Pacific headquarters and host a key R&D and manufacturing site here. This is Illumina's genome sequencer, which is designed and manufactured in Singapore. Engineers across different disciplines work together to design this. When COVID-19 first emerged, it was such a machine that first sequenced the virus. It did so within hours, allowing scientists around the world to start developing drugs and vaccines. Illumina's presence has benefited other Singapore enterprises like Venture Corporation and Sunningdale Tech. Their partnerships with Illumina have helped them to build new innovation capabilities and expand to new areas. To enhance our technology and innovation engines, we have to anchor more high-quality investments. There have been attempts internationally through BEPS 2.0 to ensure that multinational enterprises, or MNEs, pay a minimum level of taxes worldwide, or to tilt the playing field in favor of governments. But in reality, MNEs wield considerable leverage and options. And that is why governments everywhere are still spending significant amounts to attract investments. We cannot afford to outbid the major economies, but we do need to set aside sufficient resources to maximize our competitive strengths. So I will top up the National Productivity Fund by $3 billion. Our R&D efforts are critical in powering our innovation and technology engines. The government has consistently invested about 1% of GDP annually in R&D over the last 20 years. These investments have borne fruit. For example, our biotech ecosystem would not be where it is today without Biopolis, which we built more than 20 years ago. It also served as a platform for biotech talent to gather and share knowledge that then diffused into our education system, which uplifted a new generation of Singaporeans. To sustain this momentum, we must invest to keep our R&D infrastructure at the cutting edge. For our biotech sector, we will refresh our public biosciences and medtech research infrastructure in the Greater One North area. This will provide state-of-the-art facilities, promote collaboration within our research community, and enable faster translation of research into commercial solutions. In the semiconductor space, we will develop a new national semiconductor R&D fabrication facility. This will provide industry-grade tools for researchers and industry partners to prototype and test new semiconductor innovations. These developments will cost about $1 billion. We will also support companies that undertake R&D and innovation in partnership with other stakeholders. We have a good suite of schemes today which we will further enhance, and more details are in the annex to the budget. Second, we will strengthen our enterprise ecosystem. Over the years, we have developed a stronger pool of globally competitive startups and enterprises, but there's still more to be done. We want Singapore to be a place where exciting ventures develop and grow into the leading enterprises of the future. We already have a good pipeline of such promising enterprises. For example, AEM Holdings is a Singapore-headquartered provider of semiconductor testing solutions. Its products serve a critical role in the chip production process by helping to detect manufacturing defects or design flaws. AEM today has a global footprint with manufacturing plants and R&D teams across Asia, Europe, and the US. We will provide more support for enterprises to scale up, execute their growth plans, and compete on the global stage. In particular, I will extend our support schemes for internationalization and for mergers and acquisitions. And again, the details are in the annex to the budget. Some ventures are started by global companies or by experienced entrepreneurs. as our investment promotion agency, EDB, has close links with these multinational firms and entrepreneurs. So EDB will launch a global founder program later this year to encourage global founders to anchor and grow more new ventures in Singapore. To succeed, all enterprises must invest in technology to enhance their competitiveness and productivity. Enterprises can adopt off-the-shelf solutions like AI-powered analytics and digital marketing tools. We will continue to encourage the adoption of such solutions through initiatives like the Productivity Solutions Grant and the SMEs Go Digital. Beyond a certain stage, enterprises will need AI solutions which are tailored to their needs and integrated into their business processes and systems. To support this, I will set aside up to $150 million for a new enterprise compute initiative. Under this initiative, eligible enterprises will be partnered with major cloud service providers to access AI tools and computing power, as well as expert consultancy services. This will help enterprises leverage AI more effectively in their transformation journey. Companies also need capital to execute their growth plans. We now have a more vibrant financing ecosystem backed by a growing network of angel investors, venture capitalists, and private equity firms. This is complemented by government investment funds which invest in promising companies alongside commercial partners like 65 Equity Partners and Heliconia Capital. Over the past 5 years, we have set aside over $1.8 billion to support enterprise growth through investment funds. Like other private equity funds, our investments generally span a 3 to 7 year horizon. To help enterprises with longer growth trajectories, we will deploy some of our funds as patient capital with longer investment horizons to ensure that promising companies have the resources they need to thrive. Globally, we have seen the emergence of a private credit market which offers innovative financing solutions to enterprises. But few of these private credit funds focus on Asia, much less Singapore-based enterprises. So we will introduce a new $1 billion private credit growth fund. This will provide more financing options for high-growth local enterprises, and the Minister for Trade and Industry will share more at the Committee of Supply. As enterprises scale up, they may also list on a stock exchange to access more capital. Larger companies with significant overseas revenues will typically choose to list abroad to be closer to their main consumer markets. We recognize and accept these as commercial decisions. But there has been feedback that the Singapore Stock Exchange is not attractive even for companies that are focused mainly on Singapore and Southeast Asia. And that is why we set up the Equities Market Review Group, chaired by Minister Chee Hong Tat, to strengthen the attractiveness of our stock market to such listings and investments. The review group has developed its first set of measures. They include several tax-related recommendations which have been submitted to MOF just in time for the budget. I accept their recommendations and will introduce tax incentives for Singapore-based companies and fund managers that choose to list in Singapore and grow their economic activities here. I will also introduce a tax incentive for fund managers which invest substantially in Singapore-listed equities to encourage more investment in our capital markets. The review group will share more details on its measures in the coming days. Third, to unlock our growth potential, we must invest in world-class infrastructure and find innovative ways to overcome our resource constraints. Singapore thrives as a hub economy, facilitating the flow of people, capital, goods, and ideas. To sustain this position, we must ensure excellent connectivity with the rest of the world, both physically and digitally. Development on the Tuas port is progressing well, and Singapore recorded new highs last year in vessel arrival tonnage, container throughput, and bunker sales. This reinforces our role as a leading maritime hub. we have achieved island-wide 5G coverage, and we are upgrading our nationwide broadband network to deliver speeds up to 10 times faster. This will enhance digital connectivity for businesses and individuals. Our air hub is another key pillar of connectivity. We will break ground for Changi Airport Terminal 5 in the coming months. When completed, Terminal 5 will expand our airport's capacity by more than 50% and will ensure that Singapore remains a critical gateway for global travel and trade. To ensure sufficient resources to develop our air hub, I will top up the Changi Airport Development Fund by $5 billion. With the President's concurrence, the government will also provide a guarantee through Changi Airport Group. This will help to lower the cost of borrowings needed to develop Terminal 5 and supporting infrastructure in Changi East. Besides infrastructure, we also need better solutions to address our resource constraints and enhance our economic resilience. A generation ago, our critical constraint was water. We tackled this head-on, developed new water, and built our water industry. Today, we face a different challenge. The industries of the future are artificial intelligence, semiconductors, biopharmaceuticals are highly energy intensive. To meet these growing energy needs and to bring down our carbon emissions at the same time, we will need more clean power. Expanding access to clean energy is therefore a major national imperative. One immediate solution is to import low-carbon electricity from the region. We are making progress on such electricity imports. We've started a pilot with Peninsular Malaysia and expanded the capacity of a power trading initiative with Laos, Thailand, and Malaysia. By 2035, we expect that about 1/3 of our projected electricity demand can be met through electricity imports. But beyond imports, we also need to have our own domestic sources of clean power to ensure greater energy resilience. Our options are inherently limited because we do not have the natural resources nor the land to meet our needs using hydro, wind, or solar power. We have been closely evaluating the use of low-carbon hydrogen for power generation, but there are inherent challenges in the production, storage, and transportation of hydrogen, which make it hard to scale up in a commercially viable manner. One established low-carbon energy source that is used globally is nuclear power. We had considered the possibility of using nuclear power back in 2010. We assessed then that conventional nuclear technologies were not suitable for Singapore. But we continue to keep a close eye on nuclear energy developments and progressively build capabilities in nuclear safety over the past decade to keep our options open. Since then, we have seen significant advancements in nuclear technologies. One such development is that of small modular reactors, or SMRs, which have better safety features than conventional reactors. Presently, only a few SMRs have been deployed around the world, but many more could become operational by the end of this decade. Interest in nuclear energy is also increasing worldwide. In our region, several countries are planning to include nuclear in their energy mix. Malaysia and Indonesia have also experience in nuclear technologies and have operated research reactors for some time. We will therefore study the potential deployment of nuclear energy in Singapore. We will take further steps to systematically build up our capabilities in this area. We have signed agreements with the US on civil nuclear cooperation. We are also working on similar cooperation with other countries which have capabilities and experience in civilian nuclear power, especially SMRs. Within the government, we will reorganize ourselves to provide greater emphasis on this work. We will need new capabilities to evaluate options and to consider if there is a solution that Singapore that can deploy in a safe and cost-effective way. And these capabilities will also be needed for nuclear safety, which will become more salient given the growing regional interest in nuclear power. Be it electricity imports, hydrogen or nuclear, we will need to make major investments in new infrastructure. And that's why we established the Future Energy Fund last year. I will top up the fund by $5 billion. This will further support our critical undertaking to secure clean power for Singapore. Our efforts to enhance our technology and innovation engines, strengthen our enterprise ecosystem, invest in new infrastructure and overcome our resource constraints will enable us to refresh our value proposition and stay ahead in a rapidly changing world. Over the decades, we can see how Singapore's economic success has translated to tangible improvements in our lives. In the past, tertiary graduates had fewer job options to choose from, with career paths revolving around a few traditional areas. These days, the job landscape is far more diverse. Those with an interest in science and engineering can pursue opportunities in advanced manufacturing, IT, biomedical science, and sustainability, amongst others. Those with strengths in creativity and people-oriented roles can explore careers in the creative industry, lifestyle and hospitality sectors, as well as sports and fitness. Our thriving care economy also offers a wider range of opportunities, including in early childhood education, healthcare, and elder care. This is what economic dynamism and growth can deliver for our people. And so we will keep our economy strong and vibrant, ensure that there are even more opportunities and good jobs for all Singaporeans, both now and in the future. A growing economy creates more well-paying jobs, but the jobs of the future will not be the same as the jobs of today. Rapid technological advances, especially in AI, will transform workplaces and jobs. Just a few years ago, tools like ChatGPT didn't even exist. Now there's a rapidly expanding ecosystem of AI models. They can generate high-quality text, images, and videos. They can write better programming code than many experts, assist in complex problem solving, and even help to accelerate research breakthroughs. AI will get better in the future, and other new disruptive technologies will emerge. It is hard to predict how they will impact specific industries and jobs, but one thing is clear. Our workers must be equipped with the skills to stay competitive and relevant. That's why we are investing heavily in lifelong learning and have made significant moves to strengthen Skills Future as a key pillar of our social compact. At last year's budget, I introduced the Skills Future Level Up program to support mid-career Singaporeans in getting a significant skills reboot. Under the program, all Singaporeans aged 40 years and above will get $4,000 in Skills Future credit. From next month, individuals can apply for a training allowance of up to $3,000 per month for selected full-time courses. They will have 24 months worth of allowance, which is up to $72,000 per worker. Some Singaporeans prefer to continue working while upskilling on a part-time basis. Take, for example, Ms. Zarina binti Abdul Rahman. She started out as an intern in Randstad Sourceright, a global recruitment agency, and is now an office administrator. She wants to upgrade her skills in business operations, but is unable to pursue full-time studies due to her work and family commitments. So she's pursuing a part-time diploma in business practice at Nanyang Polytechnic. While workers like Zarina continue to earn their salaries through part-time training, they also incur training-related expenses. We will therefore extend the training allowance to workers undergoing part-time training. They can enjoy a fixed allowance of $300 per month to defray their learning expenses. And this part-time training allowance will be implemented early next year. The Minister for Education will share more at the Committee of Supply. We will also give a further boost to our lower wage workers who will benefit from early upskilling. Today, our lower wage workers can tap on the Workfare Skills Support Scheme from the age of 30. The scheme provides employers with absentee payroll support when they sponsor workers for training. It also provides workers with a training allowance when they go for self-sponsored training. Currently, the Workfare Skills Support Scheme is designed primarily to support short courses that are completed over a few days. But lower wage workers stand to benefit more from longer form courses that provide more substantial reskilling and upskilling. We will therefore introduce an enhanced tier of support under the Workfare Skills Support for lower wage workers. This enhanced support will be modeled after the Skills Future Level Up program and will benefit lower wage workers when they turn 30. So this will start earlier at age 30. The Minister for Manpower will share more details at the COS. Our institutes of higher learning are key partners in supporting lifelong learning. They equip our workers with relevant skills for a changing economy and provide a dedicated setting for deep learning. We will support the Singapore University of Social Sciences, or SUSS, in developing a new city campus. This will enable SUSS to champion lifelong learning and deliver programs with a strong social emphasis at an accessible location in the city for learners of all ages. We will also extend the Singapore Universities Trust by 10 years to 31st March 2042 to support the fundraising efforts of our newer autonomous universities, namely SUSS and the Singapore Institute of Technology. The Trust provides matching grants for donations to support our autonomous universities in building up their endowment funds. Sir, the government is fully committed to supporting the lifelong employability of our workers. We cannot stop the waves of technological innovations, nor can we save every job. But we can and we will invest in every worker and every Singaporean. We will equip everyone with the skills to adapt, compete, and succeed in a changing economy. And in tandem, we will help our companies to restructure and transform and to upgrade their workforce. Companies are best placed to drive business and workforce transformation, but some may face difficulties doing so due to short-term cost pressures. And we've also received feedback and suggestions to streamline and improve the way government agencies administer their support to enterprises. We will therefore introduce a new Skills Future Workforce Development Grant. This will bring together existing schemes administered by Workforce Singapore and Skills Future Singapore and simplify the application process. The new grant will also provide higher funding support of up to 70% for job redesign activities. In addition, we will introduce a redesigned Skills Future Enterprise Credit. The credit is an existing scheme which helps employers defray the out-of-pocket costs for enterprise and workforce transformation. But to use the credit, companies have to pay upfront for staff training and then wait for reimbursement. And there are also employers who are not aware of the credit or how it can be used. So we will redesign the credit to make it more accessible. The revamped credit will operate more like an online wallet. Companies can easily check how much they have, and they can use the credit to immediately offset out-of-pocket costs for eligible workforce transformation initiatives and causes, rather than do so on a reimbursement basis. All companies with at least 3 resident employees will get a fresh $10,000 in the redesigned Skills Future Enterprise Credit. The new credit will be available in the second half of 2026 and will last for 3 years. Meanwhile, companies can continue to use the existing credit. It was originally due to expire in June this year, but we will extend it until the new credit is ready. Our tripartite partners play key roles in workforce transformation. In particular, NTUC's company training committees, or CTCs, bring union leaders and employers together to design and implement workforce upgrading plans. The results have been promising. Since the initiative started in 2019, NTUC has set up more than 2,700 CTCs. Almost 4 in 5 are in small and medium enterprises. Through the NTUC CTC grant, NTUC is supporting more than 400 transformation projects, which will benefit over 7,000 workers with better work prospects. NTUC would like to start more CTCs and help more companies transform. We will support them in their efforts. I will set aside additional funding of around 200 million for NTUC's CTC grant to help more companies transform. We will also expand the CTC grant to support employer-led training that leads to formal qualifications or certifications. Let me show how companies can benefit from all of these initiatives in a concrete way. Take, for example, SETS, our main air cargo handler and airline caterer at Changi Airport. SETS is investing in new equipment and technology to improve the efficiency of its catering services. It also needs to train its workers to handle the new equipment and redesign workflows and jobs. It can access the additional $10,000 in SkillsFuture Enterprise Credit. It can tap on the new SkillsFuture Workforce Development Grant to cover up to 90% of the cost for reskilling workers and up to 70% of the cost for redesigning jobs. SETS has worked with NTUC to form a CTC and has been sending its employees for the work-study diploma in airport operations at ITE. The work-study diploma helps these employees acquire critical skills, including managing operations and resource planning, and they can go on to take on supervisory roles in SETS subject to good performance. Currently, SETS fully sponsors its workers' out-of-pocket program fees. The CTC grant will help to offset some of these training costs and provide enhanced funding for absentee payroll when the trainee is away from work. So these are tangible benefits which companies can enjoy, and we encourage all companies to press on with their workforce and business transformation. In addition, we will strengthen our support to nurture and groom Singaporean leaders in the corporate sector. We do see more and more Singaporeans taking on leadership roles in large firms and MNEs operating here. We want to grow this leadership pipeline. We will provide more support to equip Singaporeans and enable them to succeed on their own merit. To compete for leadership roles with regional and global responsibilities, Singaporeans must gain overseas experience, managing operations in different countries, navigating diverse cultures, and working seamlessly across borders. Currently, government agencies like Enterprise Singapore, MAS, and IMDA have schemes which support companies to send Singaporeans for overseas work postings and leadership milestone programs. The feedback from such schemes has been positive. So we will set aside more resources to increase the capacity of these schemes and provide more opportunities for promising Singaporean leaders. And the Minister for Manpower will share more at COS. Even with reskilling and upskilling, some workers may face career setbacks due to economic and business disruptions. We will help workers who lose their jobs to get back on their feet through the SkillsFuture Job Seeker Support Scheme, which will start from April this year. The scheme will provide financial support of up to $6,000 over 6 months to give our workers assurance as they undergo training or search for jobs. We will also increase the provision of career matching services. Today, WSG and its partners, like NTUC's E2I, run about 30 physical centers and touchpoints island-wide, placing about 40,000 job seekers every year. The centers work with the job seekers to shortlist jobs, work on their resumes, and prepare them for interviews. Besides nationwide programs, there is benefit in facilitating job search at a localized level. This will help job seekers who prefer to take on jobs near their homes, for example, to balance work and caregiving responsibilities. Today, Northeast CDC runs job placement centers for its district in partnership with WSG. The centers have yielded meaningful outcomes. We will expand localized job matching to all CDCs across the island. We will also strengthen our support for two groups of workers in this budget, seniors and ex-offenders. More seniors are staying employed as our population ages. We want to work with employers to tap on the experience and wisdom of seniors who are able and wish to continue working. In the immediate term, I will extend the Senior Employment Credit, or SEC, by 1 year to end 2026. This will provide wage offsets for employers who hire Singaporean seniors aged 60 and above and earning less than $4,000 a month. In line with the increase in the re-employment age, I will raise the qualifying age for the highest SEC wage support tier to 69 years old from 68 years old today. The government will reimburse companies up to 7% of the wages that they pay to workers aged 69 and above. Later this year, MUM will convene a tripartite work group on senior employment. The work group will undertake a holistic and longer-term review of senior employment policies to improve the employability of seniors and increase the availability of jobs that better suit their needs. In line with the recommendations of the tripartite work group on older workers, we will proceed with the next step of planned CPF contribution rate increases for senior workers. We will increase the CPF contribution rates for those aged above 55 to 65 by 1.5 percentage points in 2026. We will also continue to provide the CPF transition offset to employers for another year to cover half of the increase in employer contributions for 2026. With this move, senior workers can build up their retirement savings, and businesses will get continued support from the government to cushion the impact on business costs. For ex-offenders, employment is integral to their reintegration into society. To encourage employers to give ex-offenders a second chance, we had earlier introduced the Uplifting Employment Credit, which provides a wage offset to employers hiring ex-offenders. Last year, the credit supported close to 700 employers in hiring more than 1,500 ex-offenders. To encourage more employers to hire ex-offenders, I will extend the Uplifting Employment Credit to end 2028. Sir, Singaporeans at the core of everything we do. We will do everything we can to develop and realize the potential of all our people so that they, in turn, realize their aspirations and dreams for themselves and their families. Our Singapore story is one of sustained investment and continuous improvement. Over time, we have transformed our living environment into a thriving metropolis and a beautiful home. There's still much more to do in the years ahead. We will upgrade our homes and estates, refresh and rejuvenate our landscape and infrastructure, and importantly, prepare for a future of rising global temperatures. Addressing the climate crisis requires strong international collaboration and collective action. Unfortunately, momentum on global climate efforts has slowed. This will make it harder for all of us to tackle climate change. Despite these challenges, we remain resolute in our commitment to decarbonization. We will work with international partners and do our part to sustain efforts and drive meaningful progress. Just a week ago, we submitted our new climate target to the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change. We have committed to reducing our emissions to between 45 to 50 million tons of carbon dioxide equivalent by 2035. This will bring us one step closer to realizing our longer-term aim of achieving net zero emissions by 2050. I shared earlier about our plan to access more sources of clean power. That will be critical for us to achieve net zero. Beyond energy, we will also accelerate efforts to decarbonize our transport sector, which accounts for about 15% of our total emissions today. Our aim is to have 100% cleaner energy vehicles by 2040, and we are making good progress towards this target. Last year, around a third of all new cars registered were electric vehicles or EVs, and almost half were hybrid vehicles. But adoption of clean energy variants of heavy vehicles has been slower due to limited model availability, higher upfront cost, and less accessible charging infrastructure. To accelerate the adoption of clean heavy vehicles, we will introduce a new heavy vehicle zero emission scheme and an electric heavy vehicle charger grant. These schemes will provide incentives for the purchase of the heavy vehicle and co-funding of the charging infrastructure. The Minister for Transport will share more at COS. Currently, drivers of internal combustion engine vehicles pay fuel excise duties. These duties contribute to revenue and also serve as a form of usage charge. EVs, while much less pollutive, should not be exempted from usage charges. We are still considering how to design a usage charge mechanism for cleaner energy vehicles. In the interim, we have introduced the additional flat component, or AFC, of road tax for cars and electric light goods vehicles. We will now introduce the AFC for electric heavy goods vehicles and buses. The AFC will be set at $250 per year for electric heavy goods vehicles and $190 and $550 per year for electric minibuses and large buses, respectively. It will be phased in over 3 years, starting from January 2026, and will be implemented in full by January 2028. Alongside electrification, increasing the use of mass public transport is central to reducing emissions and our vision of a more connected and car-light Singapore. Our target is for 8 in 10 households to be within a 10-minute walk from a train station. We are investing over $60 billion in this decade to expand and renew our rail network, which forms the backbone of our public transport system. Singaporeans can look forward to the new Jurong Region Line and Cross Island Line, as well as the extensions of the Thomson East Coast Line, Downtown Line, and the Circle Line. We will continue to study how our rail network can be expanded. And we are also investing close to an additional $1 billion to increase and enhance our bus services under the Bus Connectivity Enhancement Program. As we do our part to reduce emissions in Singapore, we also have to assume the worst and take steps to protect ourselves against climate risk. If the world continues on a fossil fuel-based development trajectory over the coming years, global temperatures will keep rising, and that means we can expect a mean sea level rise of over 1 meter by 2100. Coupled with high tides and storm surges, the impact will be significant, well above 1 meter. And that means that around 1/3 of Singapore will be vulnerable to coastal flooding. We are therefore developing and implementing plans to better protect our island. We will employ a range of solutions to do so. These range from static structures like sea walls to more specialized measures like barrages and tidal gates, as well as reclamation to create more land. In the southeastern part of Singapore, we earlier announced plans to reclaim land to develop Long Island. Besides raising the ground level above rising sea levels, This will create additional space for homes, as well as new waterfront parks for outdoor recreation. In addition, PUB will complete site-specific studies for the Greater Southern Waterfront and Changi this year. Studies for Jurong Island and the Northwest Coast are also underway. And step by step, we will complete the plans for coastal protection around the entire island. The actual implementation of measures could stretch over 2 decades or longer, starting from the 2030s onwards. But it would be prudent to set aside funds now to ensure we can proceed with these major investments, which will benefit both current and future generations. So I will top up the Coastal and Flood Protection Fund by $5 billion. The government is taking steps to green our energy and transport sectors and to protect our island from climate risks. Singaporeans too have a part to play in this. Sustainability is everyone's responsibility. Individuals have the power to drive change through their choices and behavior. To fully realize our green future, we will need to make lifestyle adjustments and adopt sustainable habits in our daily lives. Every individual action counts. Last year, we enhanced the climate-friendly households program by extending it to all HDB households and increased the vouchers quantum to $300 and expanded its use to a broader range of energy and water-efficient products. We will further enhance the program by providing an additional $100 worth of climate vouchers to HDB households. We will also extend the climate vouchers to all Singapore citizen households living in private properties. I encourage all households to make the switch to more resource-efficient products if you have not done so already. Sir, we have come a long way in building today's Singapore, but our journey is far from over. Our next decade will be pivotal as we accelerate efforts to decarbonize our economy and enhance the climate resilience of our built environment. We have clear plans to do so. And as long as this government is in charge, we are committed to delivering them. We will ensure that our island nation survives even as the oceans rise. And we will build a better and greener future for all. A major part of our Forward Singapore agenda is to nurture a more caring and inclusive society, one where every Singaporean feels valued and supported, regardless of age, ability, and circumstance. And in this year's budget, I will take further steps towards these goals. Families play a key role in strengthening our society and supporting each of us to be the best versions of ourselves. Lower income and vulnerable families face more challenges. So we will do more to support their efforts to achieve stability, self-reliance, and mobility. Last year, we introduced ComLink Plus. Under this initiative, we are providing more customized support. Family coaches and volunteer befrienders work directly with ComLink Plus families. Together, they develop concrete action plans to achieve nearer and longer-term goals, like obtaining employment and saving for a home. And as the families make progress, they will receive financial top-ups in the form of ComLink Plus progress packages. For example, families can receive up to $30,000 in CPF top-ups if the adults sustain employment and do their part to save up for a home. In tandem with ComLink Plus, we have the Fresh Start housing scheme. It helps second-timer families with children living in public rental flats to start afresh and own their own homes by buying a shorter lease new flat with an additional housing grant. We will enhance Fresh Start. Today, eligible families can receive a $50,000 grant to buy a new 2-room flexi or standard 3-room flat on a shorter lease. We will increase the grant to $75,000. There are also first-timer families with children living in public rental flats. They typically face more significant challenges in life, like coping with medical issues in the family or raising children as a single parent. Hence, they may have difficulties buying a flat with a full 99-year lease, even as first-timers. To support these families in their home ownership journey, we will allow them to buy shorter lease subsidized flats through Fresh Start. And the Minister for National Development will share more at COS. While we provide targeted help for the more vulnerable groups, we will also do more to support all families across every stage of life. This begins with marriage and parenthood. We have made significant moves in recent years, including enhancing the baby bonus cash gift and the government's contributions to the Child Development Account, or the CDA. We have just enhanced paid parental leave to 30 weeks in total, which will enable parents to spend more time with their infants. In this budget, we will further reduce monthly full-day childcare fee caps in government-supported preschools. The fees will be capped at $610 for anchor operator centers and $650 for partner operator centers. After basic childcare subsidies, a dual-income family will pay about $300 per child. Lower and middle-income families will pay less after additional subsidies. So this reduction will keep full-day preschool expenses similar to those of the fees for primary school and after-school student care combined. Couples with more children often worry about additional costs because the demands grow with each additional child. We will introduce a large family scheme to support married couples who have or aspire to have 3 or more children. This will consist of 3 components. First, a $5,000 increase in the Child Development Account First Step Grant. This will apply to each third and subsequent child born from today onwards. The CDA monies can be used to defray preschool and healthcare expenses of the child and their siblings. Second, a new $5,000 large family MediSave grant, which will be disbursed into the mother's MediSave account, again, for each third and subsequent child born from today onwards. And this can be used to offset the mother's pregnancy and delivery costs or her family members' healthcare expenses. Third, $1,000 in Life SG credits will be disbursed annually to families for each of their third and subsequent children during the years that the child turns 1 to 6. And this can help to defray a wide range of household expenses. Let me illustrate what all this means for couples with young children. Take the example of Elizabeth and Mervyn. They have 4 children, turning 1, 4, 7, and 8 this year. They will receive $500 in Life SG credits for each child. This is to help them with cost pressures, which I had highlighted earlier in my speech. They will also receive $1,000 annually in the large family Life SG credits for each of their third and fourth children up to when they turn 6. That amounts to $11,000 in benefits from this budget. Or take another example, Joelle and Kristen have 2 daughters turning 3 and 5 this year. They are expecting a baby boy in May. Again, they will receive the one-off $500 in Life SG credits for each of their children. But with a third child on the way, they will receive the full benefits of the large family scheme, $5,000 in CDA, $5,000 in MediSave, and $1,000 every year until the child is 6 years old. So as a family, they will receive a total of $17,500. Seniors are an important part of many families. To support our seniors to live and age well, we have been reviewing and updating our approach to retirement, healthcare, and caregiving. We have provided seniors more assurance for their retirement adequacy. We introduced a modular package to support all seniors born in 1973 or earlier. And we also enhanced the Workfare Income Supplement and the Silver Support Scheme. Our priority is to empower seniors to stay active and healthy. And that's why we rolled out Healthier SG and Age Well SG. Our plans include creating a more conducive living environment for our seniors. Through the Enhancement for Active Seniors, or EASE program, we have significantly improved the mobility and safety of seniors through subsidized senior-friendly fittings and installations in HDB households. EASE has been well received by HDB residents. We will expand EASE for 3 years up to 2028 to households living in private properties so that more seniors can benefit. As we get older, we are all likely to spend more on healthcare. To provide more assurance, we will introduce a 5-year matched MediSave scheme. The scheme will be made available to eligible lower-income seniors aged 55 to 70 years old. For every dollar of voluntary top-ups received in their MediSave accounts, the government will provide a dollar-for-dollar matching grant of up to $1,000 per year. So this will complement the existing match retirement savings scheme. Both match savings schemes will help lower-income seniors, especially our grandmothers, mothers, and aunts who were homemakers and caregivers. The contributions from both the government and their loved ones will better support their retirement and healthcare needs and give them greater assurance as they age. While we do our best to help our seniors stay healthy, the reality is that over time, more of them will become frail and may require long-term care. Currently, the government provides significant subsidies for long-term care services, particularly for lower and middle-income families. This is complemented by CareShield Life, which is our national long-term care insurance scheme, which provides a monthly cash payout upon severe disability. We will increase our support for seniors with more severe care needs and who may require residential care, such as in a nursing home. We will increase existing subsidies for residential long-term care services by up to 15 percentage points. We will also raise the maximum qualifying per capita household income to $4,800. Many in the older cohorts, especially those born in 1969 or earlier, do not benefit from CareShield Life and therefore will face higher out-of-pocket costs. For this group, we will introduce additional subsidies of 5 percentage points. Many seniors prefer to age in place as much as possible, supported by their families and friends. They can opt for a range of care options. Some may use care services like daycare or home care, while others rely primarily on family caregiving. We will also enhance support across the entire spectrum. We will increase existing subsidies for long-term care services in the home and community by up to 10 percentage points, and similarly raise the maximum qualifying per capita household income to $4,800. And we will similarly introduce additional subsidies for cohorts born in 1969 and earlier by 15 percentage points. We will also increase the subsidies provided under the Seniors Mobility and Enabling Fund to cover the rising cost of home healthcare items like adult diapers, and to also cover additional categories of such items. To better support those who are looking after seniors at home, we will enhance the Home Care Giving Grant. This is a cash grant which can be used to offset daily care costs. We will raise the quantum for the Home Care Giving Grant. The maximum grant will increase to $600 per month from $400 today. We will also raise the maximum qualifying per capita household income for the home caregiving grant to $4,800 so that more caregivers receive support. We expect at least 80,000 seniors to benefit from the enhanced long-term care subsidies and grants, which will be implemented from next year. The enhancements are expected to cost around $300 million in financial year or FY 2026, and more in future years as our population continues to age. Besides higher subsidies, insurance will also play a part in easing the cost burden of long-term care. With a rapidly aging population, we have to work hard to manage the increase in long-term care costs and ensure a good mix of funding support between individual co-payment, government subsidies, and insurance. We are studying this issue carefully, and the Minister for Health will say more at the COS. We will also do more to support persons with disabilities and ensure they can live with dignity and pursue their aspirations. We have laid good foundations with our investments in early intervention and special education, which support persons with disabilities until they are around 18. But many parents worry about what happens post-18, after their children graduate from the structured environment of a special education or SPED school. We are looking into these post-18 pathways for these students and studying how we can provide more meaningful support. In particular, those who are transiting to work may need more support to build up their work readiness and adjust to an employment setting. This includes additional learning support to gain soft skills and to adapt to new routines. Take 21-year-old Charlene Lee, for example. After graduating from St. Andrew's Autism School in 2021, she underwent 3 months of employment training in housekeeping and soft skills. She was able to secure a 9-month internship with the Liamoy Old Age Home as a general housekeeping assistant under supportive supervisors. At the end of the internship, she was offered full-time employment, and she's doing now well at this home and happy to do her part to take care of the residents there. We want to see more stories like her, and so we will invest more in building the support structures for persons with disabilities to transit more smoothly from school to work. We will also do more for those with higher care needs who need a more structured environment beyond school to stay active. These are issues which we will study comprehensively with stakeholders. It will be a multi-year endeavor, and the Minister for Social and Family Development and Minister for Education will share more at the COS. Concurrently, we will provide more support for employers who may be concerned about the costs and efforts needed to redesign jobs and adapt their workplaces when they hire people with disabilities. In particular, we will extend the Enabling Employment Credit to end 2028 to offset wages for persons with disabilities. We will also provide more financial support to persons with disabilities. Their caregivers will benefit from the increase in the home caregiving grant, which I mentioned earlier. As with the enhancements for seniors, we will increase subsidy rates for adult disability services and raise the maximum qualifying per capita household income for these subsidies. And we will expand the matched retirement savings scheme to include eligible Singaporeans with disabilities, regardless of their age, to help them save for retirement early. We will also step up efforts by SG Enable and the Special Needs Trust Company, or SNTC, to encourage families to plan ahead for their child's future care needs. Today, caregivers can set up financial care plans and set aside monies in trust accounts with SNTC, which will manage the trust monies for the person with disability when their caregivers pass on. To support these efforts, we will provide a dollar-for-dollar matching grant for top-ups by lower and middle-income caregivers to the trust accounts up to $10,000. Sir, we are taking concrete steps to strengthen our social support system. In this budget, I focus on families, seniors and their long-term care needs, and persons with disabilities. But we will continue to review and update other policy areas over time. This is the government's key priority because we want to build a Singapore where we have each other's backs, where no one is left behind, and we continue to stay strong and united as one people. Singaporeans across different generations and from all walks of life have played a vital role in getting us to SG 60. For a country, 60 years is a short time, but we have made great strides over this period, and there is much to be grateful for. In this budget, I will introduce an SG 60 package to recognize the contributions of all Singaporeans and to share the benefits of our nation's progress. First, I will give SG 60 vouchers to all Singaporeans aged 21 and above this year. Each one will receive $600 in SG 60 vouchers. Singaporean seniors aged 60 and above will receive $200 more, or $800 in vouchers. The SG 60 vouchers are like CDC vouchers. They can be used at all businesses that accept CDC vouchers, and half can be spent at participating supermarkets and the other half at participating heartland merchants and hawkers. We will disburse the SG 60 vouchers across the month of July. Seniors will claim first and the rest later. The People's Association and the CDCs will share more details later. Second, I will provide a personal income tax rebate of 60% for the year of assessment 2025. This will be capped at $200 so that the rebate mostly benefits our middle-income workers. Third, as Minister Indrani had announced earlier, we will welcome all Singapore citizen babies born this year with an SG 60 baby gift. Our unity is a precious asset which we must never take for granted. The experiences of countries around the world show how easy it is for trust to be eroded and for societies to become deeply divided and polarized. We must therefore remain steadfast in nurturing our cohesion and unity. And in this budget, we will invest more in strengthening our cultural core and our community bonds. We will introduce an SG Culture Pass to encourage Singaporeans to attend arts and heritage activities. All Singaporeans aged 18 and above this year will receive $100 worth of credits, which they can use for eligible activities like arts and cultural performances, museum exhibitions, and heritage experiences. The credits will be made available from September this year and are valid until end 2028. The Minister for Culture, Community and Youth will share more about upcoming initiatives for the arts and heritage sector. Our hawker centers and markets are an integral part of our way of life. This year marks over half a century since we built our first hawker centers and markets, and the 5th anniversary of the inscription of our hawker culture onto the UNESCO representative list of the intangible cultural heritage of humanity. To appreciate our hawkers and market stall holders, we will give each stall in centers managed by government and government-appointed operators a one-time rental support of $600 this year. We will also allocate up to $1 billion over the next 20 to 30 years to upgrade aging hawker centers and to build new centers. This will serve the changing needs of our stall holders and patrons. The Minister for Sustainability and the Environment will provide more details at the COS. Sports is another avenue for Singaporeans of all races and religions and backgrounds to come together. Last year, we cheered on Team Singapore at the Olympics and Paralympics. rejoicing as our flag was raised high. We celebrate with them when they do well, and we encourage them when they face setbacks. We are building new facilities in our heartlands so that Singaporeans can enjoy sports closer to where they live. In the coming years, we will have new sports facilities in Toa Payoh, Punggol, and Clementi. And we are also upgrading existing facilities in Pasir Ris, Queenstown, and Hougang. We will provide $100 in SG60 Active SG credits for all Active SG members to enjoy sports together with their family and friends. You can sign up for the free membership at the Active SG website and use the credits to book Active SG facilities and programs. Our solidarity has seen us through many challenges, including our fight against COVID. We must continue to help our fellow citizens and ensure we move forward together as a people and nation. To encourage this spirit of giving, the government provides matching funds that multiply the impact of donations. This year, we will increase our support for the fundraising efforts of charities and social causes. We will provide a 100 million top-up to the Cultural Matching Fund and extend it for 5 years until the end of financial year 2029. The government and Tote Board now provide dollar-for-dollar matching grants for the fundraising projects of Singapore-registered charities. We will provide a 270 million top-up to this enhanced fundraising program, which will be extended for 3 years until the end of financial year 2027. Many Singaporeans are passionate about social causes but may not have a specific charity in mind. The Community Chest, the Collective for a Stronger Society, and the President's Challenge provide platforms that help donors contribute to a range of programs. We will introduce a 250 million SG Gifts matching grant to provide dollar-for-dollar matching for donations made through these platforms. And to encourage sustained giving amongst larger donors, we will provide a higher $1.50 in matching for donations with a minimum 3-year commitment of at least $250,000 per year. So the larger donations will attract larger matching. In total, the government and Tote Board will set aside more than $600 million in matching funds to strengthen our spirit of giving. Earlier, I shared about SG60 vouchers. Those who are better off may want to donate their vouchers to those with greater needs. We will facilitate this, and we will share more on how they can do so in due course. Our self-help groups play an important role in addressing the needs of their respective communities and in strengthening our social compact. I thank the Chinese Development Assistance Council, Yayasan Mendaki, the Singapore Indian Development Association, and the Eurasian Association for their many contributions. We will provide the self-help groups with additional funding of $60 million over the next 5 years. This will enable them to enhance their programs and better support their communities. Many businesses have also stepped forward to support their fellow Singaporeans in this SG60 year and will be providing special SG60 discounts and offers. I would like to encourage more businesses to join in and offer their support. Singapore is at its strongest when we stand together. We may have our differences, but we are all Singaporeans living on this tiny red dot as one family. When we rally together as one, there is no challenge we cannot overcome. And this unity is what keeps us resilient, thriving, and moving forward, even in an uncertain and troubled world. A critical enabler for Singapore's continued success is sound and healthy public finances. We achieve this by living within our means and running a balanced budget over each term of government. This means spending prudently to meet our immediate and future needs, ensuring that our revenues cover expenditures, and keeping the tax burden as low as we can, while not burdening Singaporeans with debt. In this term of government, we have made several significant changes to our tax system. These revenue moves give us the resources we need to meet our spending needs and also make our fiscal system more progressive. The GST rate increase ensures we have the revenues to look after our growing number of seniors, even with rising healthcare costs. Through the assurance package, we have cushioned and delayed the impact of the GST increase for the majority of Singaporean households. Importantly, we have designed our GST system with permanent GST vouchers. This ensures that lower-income households pay a far lower effective GST rate than higher-income households. We also continue to ensure fairness and improve progressivity in our tax system. This means that those who are better off will pay more in taxes to help their fellow citizens. That's why we raised property tax rates for all non-owner-occupied residential properties, which are mainly investment properties, as well as for higher-value owner-occupied residential properties. The property tax rate changes coincided with a sharp increase in the annual values of properties, which arose because of COVID-related supply constraints in the property market. We have therefore revised and updated the annual value bands of owner-occupied property tax rates for residential properties. And that means that more homes now fall within bands with lower tax rates. To further cushion the impact, we provided property tax rebates. In November last year, we announced another rebate of up to 20% for owner-occupied residential properties in 2025, capped at $1,000. Taken together, all HDB owner-occupiers and over 90% of private residential property owner-occupiers will see lower property taxes this year. The changes we made to our tax system this term have put us on a stronger fiscal footing. They provide us the resources we need to better meet our society's needs, all while keeping our overall system of taxes and transfers fair and progressive. Let me turn to our latest fiscal position. For financial year 2024, our revenue collections were better than expected. A key reason is the upside in our corporate income tax. In the past, our corporate income tax collections were quite stable at about 3.2% of GDP. But collections increased significantly in the last 2 years and are projected to reach 4.1% of GDP in FY 2024, which is quite significant. This is an unexpected change. Corporate income tax is now the single largest contributor to total revenue, larger than even the net investment returns contribution, or NIRC. There are several reasons for this higher corporate income tax collection. Part of it is due to industry-specific cyclical factors, for example, in finance and wholesale trade. It could also be due to changes in the investment decisions of multinational enterprises as they seek out stable and reliable centers like Singapore to put more of their high-end activities. While our revenues have increased, we have also spent more on Singaporeans. For example, we provided $3 billion in MediSave top-ups in December last year, which will help to cushion the increase in MediShield Life premiums to fund better coverage and higher payouts. We also earmarked resources for projects to boost economic competitiveness, including developing critical infrastructure like Changi Terminal 5 and for the energy transition. Overall, I expect to end FY 2024 with a surplus of $6.4 billion or 0.9% of GDP. For FY 2025, I expect a similar fiscal position with a surplus of $6.8 billion or 0.9% of GDP. We will continue to keep an eye on our medium-term fiscal projections. In 2023, the Ministry of Finance released an occasional paper showing that we expect to keep our fiscal position roughly balanced until 2030. For now, this remains our assessment, and let me explain. There is considerable uncertainty about how government revenues will unfold over the coming decades. At this juncture, it is too early to determine if the recent increase in corporate income tax collections is temporary or a lasting trend. There could be some additional corporate income tax revenue from FY 2027 onwards, with the implementation of the domestic top-up tax, which will raise the large MNE's effective tax rate to 15%. But how much revenue we will get from this change depends on whether these MNEs continue to find it attractive to remain in Singapore. Moreover, there is now great uncertainty about the global tax environment. The new US administration has withdrawn from the earlier consensus forged by the OECD and other countries. And it remains to be seen what further moves the US and other major economies will make in this new geopolitical environment. So we will assess our options as global tax developments unfold and adjust our policies where necessary. Meanwhile, we are certain that expenditure will continue to rise. Government spending has been rising steadily over the years, from about 15% of GDP to about 18%. And based on historical trends, we can expect our spending to go up to 20% of GDP by around 2030. With growing global uncertainties and the need to invest more in our workers and better support our rapidly aging population, there will be added pressure to raise spending, possibly at a pace that exceeds previous increases. So we will continue to monitor fiscal trends closely and update our medium-term projections. In the meantime, we will spend responsibly and ensure resources are allocated effectively. If and when there are near-term fiscal upsides, we will put the resources to good use, including for our social and economic needs. Ultimately, we will always ensure that all Singaporeans benefit from our nation's progress. Mr. Speaker, 60 years in Chinese culture marks a full cycle of life. So in this SG60 year, we will complete one cycle and we will enter a new phase of nation building. We must brace ourselves for new challenges in this next phase. There are dark clouds over the horizon. The world is in turmoil and the situation is likely to get worse in the coming years. But this is not the first time that Singapore has had to confront tough external circumstances. We've done so repeatedly over the last 6 decades, and so we can draw confidence from what we've been through together. Consider the experiences of our pioneers, like Mr. Yao John Kiang, who is 75 this year and a resident in UT. In our early years of nation building, he and his wife worked long hours in the canteen at the Tanjong Gal camp at Tuas. They put food on the table for the SAF, as well as their own young sons at home. Times were tough, but they persevered. Their never-say-die spirit lives on in the family. John Kiang's son, Joseph, forged his own path to become a naval engineer with the SAF. He endured long stints at sea to serve and defend our nation. Determined to improve his family's future, he pursued part-time studies and earned an engineering degree while juggling work and family responsibilities. His children are now entering adulthood at 17 and 22. They have grown up in a more affluent Singapore, but they too face their share of challenges. His daughter, Jamie, started at Singapore Polytechnic just as the COVID-19 pandemic hit. Her school went online and her daily activities were disrupted. But she did not let that get her down. She adapted and pushed forward, just as her father and grandfather had done before her. I met Jamie and some of her fellow youth leaders back in 2022 after we had battled COVID for 2.5 years. They were optimistic, resilient, and full of ideas about how they can contribute. Since then, Jamie has graduated from Singapore Poly as valedictorian. Today, she is pursuing her bachelor's in integrative studies at SMU while leading a non-profit to empower and support youths in tech. She hopes to work in the philanthropic sector to make a greater impact after graduation. This is what the Singapore spirit is about. At every turn, we have chosen determination over despair, innovation over stagnation, and solidarity over division. Every generation has carved a path through its challenges and paved the way for the next generation to go even further. Budget 2025 sets out clear plans for us to continue this journey with confidence. It is a budget for the future, tackling immediate challenges while laying the groundwork for a stronger, more resilient tomorrow. It is a budget for all Singaporeans, because when Singapore thrives, every citizen benefits. Every Singaporean is supported from birth to old age, with more support given to those with less. No one is left behind. Importantly, this is a budget shaped together with all Singaporeans, advancing our Forward Singapore efforts to build the Singapore we want and empowering each of us to contribute towards our shared future. The road ahead will not be without challenges, but I am confident that our best days lie ahead of us. Together, we can keep Singapore an evergreen oasis of stability, hope, and opportunity for all. So let us move onward together for a better tomorrow. Mr. Speaker, I beg to move.
The question is that Parliament approves the financial policy of the government for the financial year 1st April 2025 to 31st March 2026. In accordance with paragraph 1 of Standing Order number 89, the debate now stands adjourned. Debate to be resumed on what day, Prime Minister?
26 February, sir.
So be it. Leader.
Mr. Speaker, I beg the Parliament to stand adjourned.
The question is that Parliament do now adjourn to Wednesday, 26 February 2025. Those who agree say aye. Aye. Those who disagree say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Order, order.
You've been watching there Prime Minister and Finance Minister Lawrence Wong delivering the Singapore Budget 2025. It's worth $143.1 billion, an amount more substantial from last year's budget. It includes an SG60 package to mark 60 years of nationhood that comes with vouchers and credits to spend. There's also a new scheme to support large families, enhancements to long-term care for our elderly, as well as training allowances to support workers, just to name a few. And all in, it is the Prime Minister's way of advancing the Forward SG plans for a stronger and more united society in what he terms as a major reset in policies and mindsets as Singapore navigates future challenges. Here's what you can expect under the new SG60 package. There will be SG60 vouchers for all Singaporeans. In July, those below 60 will get $600 and those above 60 will get $800. These can be used at all businesses that accept CDC vouchers. Those paying personal income taxes will get a 60% rebate capped at $200, while babies born this year will receive a special SG60 gift. People will also get a culture pass worth $100 credits to attend local arts and heritage activities, while another $100 of active SG credits can be used to enjoy sport programs and facilities. To encourage community giving, more than $500 million will be set aside to match donations to various charities and programs. Self-help groups will also get $60 million over 5 years. And for hawkers, each store will get $600 in rental support. Up to $1 billion will be used to build and upgrade hawker centres over the next 30 years.
Our hawker centres and markets are an integral part of our way of life. This year marks over half a century since we built our first hawker centres and markets, and the 5th anniversary of the inscription of our hawker culture onto the UNESCO representative list of the intangible cultural heritage of humanity.
There are also other cost of living support measures. For starters, all households will get $800 in CDC vouchers that can be used at supermarkets and heartland shops or hawkers. HDB dwellers will get utility rebates between $440 and $760 and 1.5 to 3.5 months offsets to SNCC fees. Some analysis now with our guests here in the studio. Dr. Wu, perhaps we can start with you. It is an SG60 budget, isn't it, which PM Wong says is meant for everyone. Thanks to a good year last year, a small revenue surplus is able to dispense some goodies. How significant do you think this budget is compared to the past ones, including SG50?
Sure. I think there is a bit of a similarity with SG50 in terms of its commemorative nature. Both commemorate Singapore having reached a certain milestone, but there are some key differences. As we remember SG50, there was a bigger focus on more supply-side structural kind of policies, silver support, SkillsFuture credit, and we did not have kind of CDC vouchers, SG60 kind of vouchers at this level that we see in SG60. Certainly, it's a different situation we are in today compared to the previous years, including SG50. So for SG60, the SG60 package at least, we see very substantial vouchers that help families and individuals to tide through the high cost of living, for example. We see very similar personal income tax rebates as before. So there is a huge commemorative element to this year's budget. Perhaps a little bit more so than SG50, I would say.
Ms. Ling, 10 years ago, during SG50, we saw a series of measures, of course, from the budget, included enhancements to the GST voucher scheme, Medisave top-ups. How does this compare? And do you agree with Dr. Wu that there are substantial differences this time around?
I think so. I think one key difference that I see really is that it's front-loaded. It's really the bird in the hand kind of philosophy, because you're talking about, $600 CDC vouchers, you're talking about $600 SG vouchers, etc. So it all adds up to about, $1,800 to $2,000 in hand for the average Singaporean. So I think this would really go quite a long way to alleviate some of the cost of living pressures that a lot of Singaporeans are concerned about. I think the other key difference really is that we are in a very strong fiscal position, the fact that we are expecting a substantial fiscal surplus for FY25, that's a bit of a surprise for me. It just tells you how healthy our revenue system is. And I think that also means that even though we have an aging population and healthcare expenses are going to rise over time, basically we are starting from a very strong base.
So it's a healthy fiscal position that we're in at this point. Dr. Wu, if you look at all the new CDC YouSave and personal income rebates. How much do you think that will help in Singapore's cost of living?
Well, I think it will help a lot. It helps that these vouchers are dispersed in a staggered way, not all at once. So it helps households to have regular funds accessible to them for their day-to-day expenses. And it helps a lot that these vouchers are targeted towards the daily necessities, supermarkets, neighborhood shops, for example. So I think these vouchers will go a long way throughout the upcoming year, helping to alleviate some of these rising costs for households.
Okay, but there are also short-term cash incentives or some sort of incentives in the shorter term. So would that be enough or sufficient for people who are still feeling the lingering effects of inflation?
I think, as Prime Minister has mentioned, the longer-term solution is jobs, it's having a vibrant economy. So we see some of the other measures which relate to skills future, which relates to restructuring the economy, supporting enterprises. These things will help to bolster incomes and economic activities, more so than short-term cash incentives. But the two sort of work hand in hand. One would alleviate short-term pressures. The other one would position the workers and households for longer-term sustainability.
I would agree with Dr. Wu. I mean, in the sense that, giving some of these cash fiscal transfers helps kind of like giving fish the concept. But, doing the structural reforms, making sure the economy is vibrant, making sure that enterprises are, upskilling and also internationalizing, that would mean that in the longer term, there will be meaningful jobs and there will be wage growth, and that is probably the best way to combat any cost of living pressures.
And quite a number of vouchers too. For example, the Culture Pass, how much of that do you think will help businesses also with their cost of living?
I think the Culture Pass is not just about helping with cost of living, because it's very much targeted at the arts and culture. I think that's really more in line of trying to give a boost to this sector, because you want to have more work-life balance, you want to have more more holistic in terms of your societal activities, and to also give this segment of people who work in this industry a little bit of an uplift, I think. And that was quite clear, I think, even through the pandemic, when this sector was actually very hard pressed.
Okay, Dr. Wu?
Well, I would agree definitely that this sector needs help. And certainly the vouchers is not just a matter of the monetary contribution, but it's a signal as well that this is an important sector, important for our tourism, for our lifestyle, for the citizens, and more broadly for the Singaporean identity. So the government is also signaling that this part of the culture and identity is a very important part, and we should support it.
Speaking of culture, under SG60, we have $600 of rental support for each stall in hawker centres and markets, and up to $1 billion over the next 2 to 3 decades. Would you also say that this is another way to tackle cost of living issues, or just a way of recognizing our hawkers?
Well, I think it kind of like kills two birds with one stone, right? Because, hawkers are a very important and integral part of society. It provides affordable and accessible food for a lot of Singaporeans, and especially, in an environment where cost is escalating quite high. The food component in our CPI basket, they're talking about, more than 20%. So I think to a certain extent that's important, but I think it also means and reflects the importance and the significance of hawker food in our society, right? I mean, the idea is that it's very much part of our culture.
Yeah, Dr. Wu?
Yes, and I think it's important that we help hawkers to manage the costs, because these costs increases in cost for hawkers tend to be passed on to consumers as well, inevitably. So helping them is, in a way, helping everyone who relies on hawker food for their daily meals.
Was it surprising to you that this came up in this year's budget?
It was a little bit of a surprise, but I think if you take one step back and look at it, the fact is that the hawker culture and hawker centres are possibly one of Singapore's attractions to overseas visitors as well.
Okay, and there's also an SG60 baby gift, of course, for all Singaporean babies that are born in the year 2025. We don't have the details yet. They are expected over the next few weeks or so, as PM Wong shared. What can we likely expect from this, Dr. Wu?
Well, we could expect a cash component, component for babies born in 2025. But I think it is more of a commemorative thing. It is to give that element of commemoration to somebody who's having a child this year, that this is a special year for Singapore. So if your child is born in this year, it is a special year.
Hopefully translate to couples having more children as well.
I think definitely. I mean, with the large family scheme as well, I think even for non-first-time parents, they'll be very excited.
All right, let's hope so. Let's hear now some reactions from the Parliament House. Our reporter Risha Matthew joins us live from there. She's joined by Bukit Panjang MP Liang Eng Hwa, who's also GPC Chairperson for Finance, Trade and Industry. Risha, what is this year's budget offer to help alleviate the cost of living pressures?
Right. So cost of living continued to be a key topic of discussion in Parliament in the budget this time round. And of course, there was also the SG60 package that was announced to help to alleviate the cost of the rising cost of everyday living. And above that, there was also measures to help with long-term challenges. And that included a relook at the economic strategy of Singapore. And senior employability also was a key focus for this time's budget. So to break down a bit about these measures and to share more on the impact of on Singaporeans, we have with us Mr. Liang Eng Hwa, the Chairperson of the Parliamentary Committee for Finance, Trade and Industry. So Mr. Liang, there was a slew of measures that were announced today. What stood out to you the most, and what were some highlights?
Well, I think overall, I sit through quite a number of budgets over the years, and this is probably the budget where it fulfills most of the wish list. I think many of the suggestions and ideas from Singaporeans, including from me and from my fellow MPs, many of these suggestions will show up in the budget. The Prime Minister obviously had taken on board these suggestions, and through various schemes put in place, some in terms of upsizing the scheme, some are broadening the base of the scheme, so that we can benefit and help Singaporeans and enterprises as well. So I would think this is how it's a signal of how he will he's going to build that relationship with Singaporeans, that he will listen and then he will find ways to deliver some of this good ideas that brought to his attention.
Right. So we also saw the much anticipated SG60 package. So in terms of that, do you think the measures are sufficient, and how would you think it would impact Singaporeans?
Well, the various schemes I would think are substantial, whether it's for tackling cost of living, there are significant upsides, for example, the CDC vouchers, the USAFE vouchers, and various other support schemes for the families. There are also the SG60 vouchers, which is more in commemoration of the 60 years of our independence. All this add together is a significant package. And in particular, I like the part on the large family schemes, where you get more assistance, more support, especially those who have the third child and subsequent child. All this helps a lot for the families to be able to cope with the various cost pressures. And I hope that Singaporeans, especially the young families, will take that as a signal that they will always have the government behind them as they build their families. Yeah. So, but other than that, I will say that on the business side, the economy, I'm very impressed with how the Prime Minister has also painted the direction we're going to. We have to really enhance our whole technology stack. We have to build that business ecosystem such that our enterprise can continue to thrive, and that's through the various support. And then those smaller businesses, there are also support scheme, the tax rebates as well as the tax benefits that are very inclusive. Even companies that do not pay taxes get to benefit from it.
Thank you, Mr. Liang.
And that was Risha Matthew reporting live from Parliament House. Time for a short break now, but don't go away. We'll be right back with more highlights, reactions and insights on the measures announced to better families and more. Do stay with us.
but in a chaotic moment.
Midnight later tonight here in Thailand, it's too little too late.
And I asked whether there's a political element to it. Nobody can exactly tell you why.
Look, things are never perfect when you're engaged in politics. Each one doing what each one wants.
So what's the United Nations doing amidst this world of supreme chaos?
We're pushing for answers every night on Asia Tonight.
Stop scrolling and check this out. Oh my goodness. What a story we could have here.
Oh, look at this. It's absolutely spectacular.
That is quite brilliant. What a shot this is. Are you not entertained? This is gripping stuff.
The CNA Summit 2025 Trade-offs in Leadership. Presenting partner, Singlife, a better way to financial freedom. The summit explores how leaders balance priorities, make tough decisions, and navigate complexity in an era of rapid change and uncertainty. Join the conversation as we bring together distinguished leaders from the public and private sector as they delve into critical internal trade-offs, including talent management, resource allocation, organizational design, and leadership style. While examining the strategic external trade-offs leaders must make to achieve stakeholder expectations, market adaptation, partnerships, and brand reputation. The CNA Summit 2025 on the 20th February. Brought to you by MediaCorp. Impact Partner, NVPC. Main Partner, Oppo, Find N5.
Three graphic designers. Three clients. Three project briefs.
To portray the essence of local food.
Something like functional.
Quintessentially Singaporean.
Can they pull it off?
That sounds good.
It's all about being simple and direct.
This is like my mock-up of your menu card.
I also do not know whether it's chicken wing or chicken leg,
This is exactly what I'm looking for.
Since the standee is pretty tall, you have to shift some things around.
Watch How Graphic on demand at cna.asia.
Welcome back. Measures to support families were also a highlight of Budget 2025. Here's a recap. Now, parents with kids below 12 will get $500 in credits to defray household expenses. About 455,000 children are expected to benefit. Those with children 13 to 20 years old will have $500 in top-ups for their child's education in EduSave. Those sending their child to government-supported preschools will also pay $30 less with reduced monthly full-day fee caps.
After basic childcare subsidies, a dual-income family will pay about $300 per child. Lower and middle-income families will pay less after additional subsidies. So this reduction will keep full-day preschool expenses similar to those of the fees for primary school and after-school student care combined.
And to encourage families to have more children, a large family scheme will give a total of $16,000 in financial support for every third and subsequent child born from today. Now, this comes in the form of various grants to offset preschool, healthcare and pregnancy costs, and $6,000 in credits to offset household expenses for the first 6 years of the child's life. For more on this topic, Sabrina Ng joins us live now from Parliament House. She's joined by Macpherson MP Tin Pei Ling, who has actively championed supporting families in Parliament. Sabrina.
Well, evidently from this budget, we see a lot of focus in uplifting and supporting families, in particular those who may be sandwiched between, supporting seniors and also caring for young children. So that includes measures to alleviate and lower the cost of childcare and also top-ups to a child's educational account. Of course, all this is coming amid declining birth rates in Singapore, which has hit record low in recent years, and amid rising cost of living and child rearing costs for parents. So with me, as you mentioned, I have Ms. Tin Pei Ling, who is MP of McPherson SMC. So first question to you, Ms. Tin. Recently, some 20 MPs spoke on a motion in Parliament about the need to support families. So could you just share, what are some highlights that you found from support measures announced today, and, what stood out to you?
Well, I think from today's budget, we hear a range of measures and grants that are tailored to the needs of families today. As you have pointed out earlier, many families in Singapore are sandwiched between having to care for seniors as well as their children. So for seniors, we've heard, matched Medisave scheme and other forms of support for longer-term care. So I think that would reduce the cost there. But what is also very attractive, or at least assuring, would be schemes such as Life SG, Child Life SG, Large Family Life SG, as well as the top-ups to the child development account. Although these will not be panacea to all the stresses that families in Singapore face, but I think to a large extent it does alleviate the pressures, and hopefully that frees up their minds to focus on what really matter to them, whether it's at work, at home, and build up the families that remain a core foundation of our society.
Well, you mentioned supporting families who are really the bedrock of our society. So how do you think these measures will go ways to move the needle and maybe encourage more parents to have children?
Well, I think if we look at the Life SG, the enhancements to Life SG, for example, basically you get more, or families get more support if they have the third child and beyond. So it's the more children that you have, the more you will receive in terms of financial support. I think that's a very clear signal, and the commitment that the government has in encouraging young families, especially Singaporean families, to have more. So I think that's something that we can be excited about, and hopefully that boosts the TFR. But overall, I think taken together, the different measures from the CTC vouchers to those that are tailored for seniors, caregivers, as well as for those with larger families, and if we're not forgetting the SG60 ang-baos this year, hopefully all these taken together will help to reduce the pressures that families really face today, and that will have that encouragement effect to be confident and have and grow their families further, have more babies if they can.
Thank you very much, Ms. Tin. That was Ms. Tin Pei Ling, MP of McPherson SMC, who spoke about support measures announced in this budget for families.
Sabrina, thanks for that. Sabrina Ng there with MP Tin Pei Ling from Parliament House. Seniors and vulnerable groups will also be getting help. Under a new scheme, the government will match dollar for dollar on voluntary Medisave top-ups to an annual cap of $1,000. A scheme that built senior-friendly fixtures and upgraded installations in HDB flats will now be expanded to include those living in private properties until 2028. On top of that, there will be increased subsidies and grants for long-term care services and those looking to manage costs looking after seniors at home. For vulnerable families, the government will increase a grant by $25,000 to $75,000 to let them buy certain types of new flats.
There are also first-timer families with children living in public rental flats. They typically face more significant challenges in life, like coping with medical issues in the family or raising children as a single parent. Hence, they may have difficulties buying a flat with a full 99-year lease, even as first-timers. To support these families in their home ownership journey, we will allow them to buy shorter lease, subsidized flats through Fresh Start.
So more support there for families, to those sandwiched between their children and elderly parents, from Child Life SG credits to lower caps on childcare fees. Ms. Ling, how much of these support do you think would move the needle and eventually get the couples to have more children?
Well, I wouldn't want to overhype about moving the needle because if you look around globally, marrying later and having less children or not having children seems to be a global phenomenon. But I think it can nudge behaviors a little bit. It does show that, the policy support from the government is definitely there. If you choose to have more children, you will get more financial assistance. And I think it's also the whole ecosystem and infrastructure, right? Hence the focus, on childcare subsidies and the top-ups to the EduSave and also the post-secondary education accounts. Because having a child is not just at birth, but really is through all the different phases. And the cost probably will just escalate as the child gets older and older. So I think to a certain extent, yes, these schemes are in place, but society also has to play the part, right? Employers also have to be more flexible in terms of working arrangements, possibly even giving time off for parents when they, especially those in the sandwich class, when there are needs that arise, whether it's from the children or from the elderly parents. So I think it really, really takes a village to raise a child.
It does indeed, yeah. Dr. Wu.
I agree. We do need a more holistic approach that involves employers, involves all aspects of being a parent, whether it is work-life balance, it's healthcare needs. But I do think that some of these packages, some of these credits that are given out today, they will help to move the needle for those who want to have kids, but may find it expensive or may find that they may have had to postpone their plans because of the life circumstances. So for these groups of society, I think these will help them. Of course, for those who haven't quite decided or have decided not to have children, it's hard to say whether these will really change the way they think.
We want to be confident of that and be hopeful, of course. But the new large family scheme, that's one that takes care of families with more than 2 children. What do you make of the government's focus on this group of Singaporeans?
I think it is a signal that we really want to tackle that fertility issue, the aging population. We want people to have larger families, not just 1 kid or 2 kids. So giving more support for the 3rd child helps a lot. As we know, costs are expensive. Raising a child in Singapore is also relatively costly. So the more children we have, the cost could really rack up for a regular family. So the more support is given for the 3rd child, the 4th child, it should help them to nudge them into having the 3rd child or 4th child.
$11,000 in benefits to help these large families with young children. How do you think families would be making use of them, Ms. Lay?
Well, I think it makes a lot of sense to try and incentivize, parents who already have 2 children to have 3 or more because they are already, in that direction, right? They are not against childbirth per se, and they are actually quite willing to embrace parenthood. So I think it's really a carrot that is being dangled in front of the right audience. So I do think that, if the government succeeds in trying to lower the cost per child, then for this group of parents to be, they'll be very, very incentivized.
And earlier, I think you were alluding to this. Minister in the Prime Minister's office, Indranee Rajah, she has said before that Singaporean families will continue to be a top national priority, even as family formation and fertility rates fall here and around the world. How do you think Singapore must manage or balance such priorities against these social norms?
Well, I think they're trying to address it from many different prongs, right? Housing is one, childcare accessibility is another, giving some upfront financial support for children when they're very, very young, between 1 to 6 years of age is another. But even then, with the education costs going up, so even those in the secondary and post-secondary type of part of the journey. So I do think that every single dollar helps in this environment where people are very concerned about rising cost. And I think you want to encourage, of course, that family as the bedrock of society will be here to stay.
Right, and also I think it's not just the large family scheme, but some of the other schemes involved in reducing cost of living will help family broadly as well. And the schemes that help with the elderly, these things all contribute to the sandwich class. If you're going to help somebody to reduce the cost of caring for their parents, as well as reduce cost of education for the children, I think that helps families a lot, and it gives the signal that, well, Singapore, it's not such a difficult place to raise a family. So it does help, I think.
But the cost of living persists.
Yes, that's right.
Okay, you were talking about seniors and enabling seniors to age well. There appears to be an expansion of long-term care for elderly support, including more home care options and caregiving assistance. There was mention that insurance should also play a part. Would you say that this budget is a signal that government is playing a greater role, or that families should shoulder an equal part? Dr. Wu.
Well, I think that it gives the signal that the government is providing more help, even as families continue to play a key role. It's in line with the government's aging in place policy. We want people to age in place at home, to receive care in a place that is familiar to them. I think most people want to age and receive care in their own homes rather than in a community setting. So many of the support that we saw today helps families to deal with that. But there's also some support for elderly who have to live in community settings and things like that. So I think it's the overall approach to aging is still between families and government. The government is showing that there is some more support being given to families.
Ms. Ling?
Well, I think this approach makes a lot of sense because it's not solely the responsibility of the government to help the aged, but it's neither is it just the families alone. I think all the stakeholders really have to work hand in hand in partnership.
For the caregivers, I suppose this would be a huge relief to them as well. There is a new 5-year matched MediSave scheme for seniors. What's your take on the rationale of this scheme? How will it affect our seniors?
Well, healthcare cost, especially the rising healthcare cost, is always one big concern for the elderly and for those who are supporting the elderly. So I guess in this sense, if you try to encourage top-ups to the MediSave accounts for the elderly, that would basically help go some way, especially if it's matched by the government, to actually addressing some of the healthcare needs of the elderly.
Dr. Wu, what's your take on the rationale of this scheme?
I absolutely agree. It helps the caregivers and the elderly to really be able to build up their MediSave accounts to provide for their future healthcare needs.
Okay, let's go now for a quick break. We will be right back with reactions to the measures announced to support Singaporean workers. Do stay with us.
We're in a chaotic moment.
Midnight later tonight here in Thailand, it's too little too late.
And I asked whether there's a political element to it. Nobody can exactly tell you why.
Look, things are never perfect when you're engaged in politics. Each one doing what each one wants.
So what's the United Nations doing amidst this world of supreme chaos?
We're pushing for answers every night on Asia Tonight.
In 2025, I will be the same age as Singapore. We will both be 60 years old.
60. It's more than just a number. It's a crossroads.
What am I going to do now? What have I done? Have I done enough?
I'm going on a journey to uncover what comes next.
皆さん、年だからできないんじゃなくて、年だからできることって必ずあると思うんで。
Seva is very important because we do something for others without expecting. They will do for us. No expectations.
It's so important for us to come out and meet friends and just to clear our minds.
Because life doesn't slow down at 60. It begins.
60岁还是很年轻，还很多时间。Me
I think at any age you can reinvent yourself.
Enjoy.
Enjoy.
Born in 1965, 2-part series premieres 1st and 2nd March on CNA.
Bad air is not something that you become immune to.
Every year, a public health crisis hits India.
Air pollution currently is what I call a medical emergency and a silent killer.
Last November, as Delhi once again becomes the world's most polluted city, why can't India solve its bad air problem?
You cannot be a superpower, a $5 trillion economy, and struggle with air quality.
We are not giving good future to our next generation.
Insight, Thursday on CNA.
My world revolves around my phone.
I'd rather have a phone than have a girlfriend.
My brain's just so trapped into the social media life. It's hard to break out of a routine that you've been in for years.
Wow, I don't have my phone, I'm gonna die here.
This affects their decision-making processes and attention.
Why get Nokia?
You have to keep pressing until you get the
What? It's the most useless thing ever.
It's good for you to have these things.
No.
They will have an issue.
Maybe they'll use this as a hammer.
My mother just now my message, right? She said, I don't understand what you're saying.
We are planning to run cognitive tests before and after the detox.
Will this detox change something?
Welcome back. A training allowance of $300 per month will be given to mid-career Singaporeans above 40 to take up selected part-time courses under the Skills Future Level Up program. Lower-income workers above 30 will also pursue selected full-time or part-time training, also stand to benefit from monthly allowances. For senior workers, the government will cover half of the increase in employer CPF contribution to encourage the hiring of seniors, persons with disabilities and ex-offenders. Schemes that offset their wages will also be extended. Companies are also getting help to transform and support workers. A new Skills Future Workforce Development Grant gives funding support of up to 70% for job redesign. Firms with at least 3 employees will also get a fresh $10,000 worth of funding to defray out-of-pocket costs for transformation. $200 million will also go to NTUC's Company Training Committee grant to help employers better transform and upskill their workers. We go live now to Mr. Patrick Tay. He is an MP in the Labour Movement as well as GPC Chair for Education. Mr. Tay, it's very good to see you. On the $200 million for NTUC company training committees, what skills will the Labour Movement prioritise and what sectors will likely most benefit from this?
Yeah, the NTUC and the Labour Movement has been lobbying the government for a top-up for the CTC grant, and I'm glad and we welcome this $200 million top-up to our CTC grant. We've seen many companies and businesses, including small and medium enterprises, benefit from this CTC grant. In the past couple of years, more than 2,700 companies have come on board, and they have benefited themselves as well as their workers. I think the key thing is this CTC grant will help companies not just encourage them to get their workers to reskill, upskill, and multi-skill, but at the same time also help in the company transformation process to raise productivity, to automate, to robotize, and of course mechanize, and a whole host of other measures. So I think this top-up CTC grants will go a long way to help the Labour Movement partner companies, and then we hope more companies come on board. And of course with workers and our union leaders and members as well, to pick up skills, the in-demand skills. As you know, there's a regular iteration of the in-demand skills. So it's sector by sector, cluster by cluster. We hope this grant will be able to equip workers with the in-demand skills in whichever sector they are in.
And transforming the businesses as well, yeah? And your comments as well on the training allowance for those 40 and above, who will benefit the most in what kind of low-wage or ordinary workers in which industries?
As you know, the half-life of skills is getting shorter, and therefore there's a need to always constantly pick up new skills amidst the digitalization and disruption and the many changes and curveballs that are happening. And of course, skills obsolescence is more faster than ever. So I think it's important that we encourage our workers to embrace this spirit of lifelong learning and continuing education and training. So I think this grant and the support and the allowance will all come together in a good way to encourage workers to embark on training, whether full-time or now even part-time, and alleviate some of the burdens or financial burdens in the day-to-day costs while embarking on CET and lifelong learning.
All right. Mr. Tay, thank you so much for speaking with us. That was Labour MP Patrick Tay, who is also the GPC Chair for Education. Businesses will also get a boost as Singapore looks to grow the economy, and all companies will get a 50% rebate on their corporate income tax. And those with at least one local employee will get a minimum $2,000. Total benefits are capped at $40,000 per firm. Companies can also get better access to AI tools and partner major cloud service providers under a $150 million initiative. More financing options will also be given to firms under a new $1 billion private credit growth fund. And for signature-based companies and fund managers who list or invest in Singapore Stock Exchange, they will be given more tax incentives. $1 billion will also be pumped into R&D infrastructure. A new national semiconductor fabrication facility will be built, and the One North area will get a refresh of biosciences and medtech research facilities.
Our R&D efforts are critical in powering our innovation and technology engines. The government has consistently invested about 1% of GDP annually in R&D over the last 20 years. These investments have borne fruit. For example, our biotech ecosystem would not be where it is today without Biopolis, which we built more than 20 years ago. It also served as a platform for biotech talent to gather and share knowledge that then diffused into our education system, which uplifted a new generation of Singaporeans. To sustain this momentum, we must invest to keep our R&D infrastructure at the cutting edge.
And joining us over Zoom right now, Ang Yit, President of the Association of Small and Medium Enterprises. Mr. Ang Yit, it's good to see you. From the perspective of SMEs, what was the one thing that would actually help them the most and allay their worries?
I think that a lot of the SMEs are looking at the ability to uplift and enhance their capabilities. That's definitely those that are looking at enhancing themselves. So that's one area. And then the other part is really the workforce transformation and helping upskill their workers. So that is, I think, addressed in this budget.
There's more money being pumped into upskilling and training of workers. Is this something that smaller businesses would need? Which sectors or types would need them the most also?
Yeah, if you look at the training part, it's always been a mixed bag, because while a lot of the training actually happens on the job, many of it doesn't really get recorded. And then there's a general idea that, training doesn't happen, but in reality it does. So what is actually happening in this particular budget is that there is a push for a credit where it is actually more accessible. And I think that makes a big difference for companies that are looking at not just doing on the job, but enhancing the skills of the workers through, courses where they do not have to be concerned about cash flow challenges. And I think with that would allow companies to be a bit more free to actually push and keep up with the technology changes and skills changes that our current day and age is facing.
Ms. Ling, in trying to keep up with these changes, monthly training allowances for low-wage and mid-career workers, the question is, what sorts of courses would you recommend or are in urgent demand now?
Well, I think the basic computer literacy skills are already being addressed many years ago. So going forward, it will probably be the more high-level skills, how to use AI, for instance, because bearing in mind that, the low-skill or low-wage workers are probably the one that could be at greater risk of displacement due to some of these disruptive technologies. So I think to keep up with the technology, I think that's very, very important. The basic knowledge of computing and of digital skills, I think these are kind of like the bedrock of where the high-value jobs will go from here.
Okay, Mr. Wu, yes.
Sure. I agree. Technology skills are important given the transformation that's going on across our sectors. But there are also other skills that are evergreens, whether it is design thinking, it is agile, it is all kinds of skills that help you to do your work better regardless of what sector you're in. So I think a combination of hard skills in tech and softer skills in management, in communications, for instance.
Okay. Mr. Ang Yit, we are moving on to businesses now. There is a new scheme. We're looking at $150 million that will go to help firms partner major cloud providers to access AI tools and computing power. How urgent is this need for SMEs?
I think if we look at the direction, I think it's a great initiative from the perspective that, we recognize the need. We recognize the kind of support and the different pieces that needs to come together, the cloud service provider, the topic, which is AI, and also consultants coming in. The question would be really in the implementation, right? If you look at the budget that's set aside, depending on the size of the projects that's going to be implemented and who actually are participating in it, it could be a very large budget, and at the same time, it could also be quite a budget that may not be enough if you have very large projects. So I think the question is, what exactly are the specifics? And if you ask me, a good approach is really to look at how to proportionately look at companies that are willing and able, and proportionately apply it to whether you are a small or medium or large, and then allow that access to be open to different companies as long as you're willing and able. I think that's one approach, but we do not know at this point.
Which sectors do you think will help the most?
I think if you look at all the businesses right now, AI is actually showing that it's cutting across all different sectors. But the question is, apart from just using it to generate a very quick response on sales, a proposal, how more can you use AI? And we are seeing that part starting to appear through the cloud. You have DeepSeek that is coming up that is small enough for many cases that it could almost be installed and run locally. And when that starts to happen, and then you have agentic AI that's coming in, that will suddenly push the adoption of AI, even for the small and medium companies, where you can use it to do a lot of productivity-related work. And you don't have to be worried about data being stored in the cloud if everything is hosted locally. So I think that once that kind of tips over, you're going to start to see a new wave of adoption coming in.
So AI sector benefiting the most from this. Dr. Wu, do you agree? Is it more than AI, right?
It's a little bit more than AI because AI is a tool, it's an enabler. So all businesses will benefit from applying AI to their processes, the work process, and their productivity. So it's a little bit more than AI, but AI is something that we should encourage across sectors and industries.
Okay. One of the economic strategies is to double down on innovation. And for one, there is going to be a new $1 billion investment for R&D infrastructure. The focus is on semiconductors and farmers. How will this trickle down to helping Singaporeans and local workers? Dr. Wu.
Sure. The research helps our tech sector. It helps, in fact, many sectors, and semiconductors have some connections to AI as well. So job creation, when you improve productivity and innovation across different sectors, you create more jobs as well. So I think in general, the population will benefit from these investments. And for Singapore in general, we do want to be at the forefront of research and innovation. We want to be early adopters. We want to have new technologies and products coming from our economy.
Ms. Ling, apart from job creation, how do you think this is going to benefit
Actually, I think there are
Singaporeans?
two very critical points about this doubling down on innovation. One is that if you look at the global trade war that's heating up globally, manufacturing production is probably going to be increasingly onshot back to the US or nearshot back to the US, and there's going to be a lot of questions about where manufacturing or production is going to be done. Okay, so if you are in that space, you're probably a little bit under pressure right now. And I think secondly, what you can keep and it will be yours really will be things that are proprietary, right? So it will be your innovation, it will be your patents, it will be your R&D, and this is not easily replicated elsewhere. So I think that space is really what you can really value add and probably hang on to for a much, much longer time. So I think Singapore really is putting money where the mouth is, R&D, innovation, and in the two growth sectors like semiconductors and pharma, these are our competitive advantage.
Tax incentives for companies listing on the SG market and fund managers investing in stocks of the Singapore market. What do you expect this impact will be? More volume, perhaps?
I think certainly it's a push in the right direction. We hope to see, of course, new IPOs coming on stream, okay, but it is a very, very competitive stage out there. So every incentive will help, but I think we have to take into account the environment, and it has to be a holistic measure as well.
Dr. Wu?
I agree, definitely. And if this is successful, it helps to build up our financial hub. So the financial services sector is something that is a very big component of our economy. So these will hopefully help to build up that aspect of the economy.
What about increased share prices?
Well, increase share prices, increase trade volumes. These are things that I think investors look forward to as well.
Mr. Ang Yit, what about you? What do you expect this impact will be on companies?
I think that it will make the companies a lot more excited in terms of the vibrancy and potential vibrancy of the market. And as such, we are seeing a lot of foreign companies coming in. And with that, I think the chances of that whole leveling up and the whole market becoming more vibrant, it's actually going to be increased through this initiative.
Ang Yit, appreciate your insights. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. That was Ang Yit, President of the Association of Small and Medium Enterprises. Now, capping our discussion on health for workers and firms earlier, Prime Minister Lawrence Wong also talked about more help to groom and nurture the next generation of leaders in the corporate sector.
To compete for leadership roles with regional and global responsibilities, Singaporeans must gain overseas experience, managing operations in different countries, navigating diverse cultures, and working seamlessly across borders. Currently, government agencies like Enterprise Singapore, MAS, and IMDA have schemes which support companies to send Singaporeans for overseas work postings and leadership milestone programs. The feedback from such schemes has been positive. So we will set aside more resources to increase the capacity of these schemes and provide more opportunities for promising Singaporean leaders.
And still ahead, we have heard the fiscal plans, but what about Singapore's fiscal health? More on that after this break.
Two countries, one vision. A cross-border ecosystem to drive global investments and economic growth.
The key really is we have to go for a win-win outcome.
A strategic location in southern Malaysia.
We have the resources, we have the land, we have the people.
The opportunities and challenges shaping the Johor-Singapore Special Economic Zone. Wednesday on CNA.
Bad air is not something that you become immune to.
Every year, a public health crisis hits India.
Air pollution currently is what I call a medical emergency and a silent killer.
Last November, as Delhi once again becomes the world's most polluted city, why can't India solve its bad air problem?
You cannot be a superpower, a $5 trillion economy, and struggle with air quality.
We are not giving good future to our next generation.
Insight, Thursday on CNA.
My world revolves around my phone.
I'd rather have a phone than have a girlfriend.
My brain's just so trapped into the social media life.
It's hard to break out of a routine that you've been in for years.
Wow, you don't have my phone, I'm gonna die. This affects their decision-making processes and attention.
Why you get Nokia?
You have to keep pressing until you get the
What? It's the most useless thing ever.
It's good for you to have these things.
No.
They will have an issue.
Maybe they'll use this as a hammer.
My mother just now my message, right? She said, I don't understand what you're saying.
We are planning to run cognitive tests before and after the detox.
Will this detox change something?
In 2025, I will be the same age as Singapore. We will both be 60 years old.
60. It's more than just a number, it's a crossroads.
What am I going to do now? What have I done? Have I done enough?
I'm going on a journey to uncover what comes next.
皆さん、年だからできないんじゃなくて、年だからできることって必ずあると思うんで。
Seva is very important because we do something for others without expecting. They will do for no expectations.
It's so important for us to come out and meet friends and just to clear our minds.
Because life doesn't slow down at 60. it begins.
60岁还是很年轻，还很多时间。Me
I think at any age you can reinvent yourself.
enjoy
Enjoy.
Born in 1965, two-part series premieres 1st and 2nd March on CNA.
Budget 2025 is larger than the previous year and is likely to end with yet another surplus of around $6.8 billion. That's about 0.9% GDP. Now, before we talk about fiscal health, earlier PM also talked about investments into infrastructure too, specifically a $5 billion top-up to the Changi Airport Development Fund. Ms. Ling, do you think a surplus will mean more of such longer-term, big-ticket items in the future?
Well, we have certainly seen quite a big special transfers, as I talked about earlier. So, given the importance of the air hub status for Singapore, I do think that it's very important, and this $5 billion deployment, I think, would be put to very, very good use. But it is interesting that because our budget always has been the case where we are laying the foundation stones not only for the current issues, but really for the structural, more medium-term, longer-term growth drivers as well. So I think all these few $billion here, a few $1 billion there, really is going to lay out the growth path, trajectory for the next decade, next 2 decades kind of story.
Dr. Wu, what's your forecast?
Well, having a surplus does give us the space to think long term, to build up infrastructure, which would otherwise have been quite difficult to fund. So I think that gives us the opportunity to build for much longer term economic needs.
How will this affect future budgets?
Well, the goal resets after the current term of government. So, in that sense, they won't have the accumulated surplus to draw upon. But I think we are in a good place. The 2 percentage point GST hike that was done over 2023 and 2024 obviously did boost GST collections a lot. In fact, now GST is the second most important driver for revenue after corporate income tax. It's overtaken personal income tax.
Yeah.
And I think at 9%, probably, it will continue to be one key pillar. But we are very well broad-based and diversified. Because you not only have corporate income tax, personal income tax, GST, you also have the NIRC contributions, and these are really like the 4 steady legs on which the Singapore budget actually sits on.
Yeah, the budgets have increased also over the years, and as you said, the needle movers for Singapore's coffers, corporate tax and property tax. But have efforts to raise revenues been fruitful?
Well, I think in the short term, yes, and we're probably quite well positioned, I would say, for at least the next 3 to 5 years. But that said, the tax environment is changing globally with BEPS 2.0. The challenge for talent, especially top talent, continues to intensify. People are giving a lot of incentives to try and get the high income earners to go to their jurisdiction. And then, of course, there is a lot to be spent not only on hard infrastructure, but also on the soft infrastructure such as healthcare and education and promotion of families. So there is always that fiscal gap, that policymakers will have to look at in the longer term. I think PM Wong did say that we're probably quite okay for the near term. But of course, the question is if our expenditure trends continue to rise faster than expected, then that could open up some issues.
The raising of GST, that did ruffle a lot of individuals, but the government did put in some mitigating measures. It is the second largest contributor to the government's coffers, to operating revenue. So what are your thoughts on the government's calibration on how to raise revenue from 2024?
Well, I think with the GST done, they're probably not going to touch the GST option anytime soon again, given that it was quite painful. But that said, I think we also see some other elements coming up. You talked about property taxes, for instance. So, some of these wealth taxes may come back into play. And of course, carbon taxes, probably as we see the next jump in terms of the carbon, tax, that would also kind of give us a little bit of buffer on that front. And of course, assuming that Singapore remains attractive to foreign direct investments, corporate income tax should continue to be fairly buoyant, as what was suggested in the FY25 budget projections.
Dr. Wu, do you expect the trend of raising GST and revenues to continue?
Well, for GST, I agree that it's going to be very difficult to raise GST again in the short to medium term. And historically, we have raised GST not so frequently. We have had buffers of years in between because GST is a regressive tax and it does hit people quite a little bit on their expenses, on their costs. In terms of revenue and surplus, I don't think it's a guarantee that we'll have a budget surplus all the time because our expenditures may go up, particularly in health and social expenditures. So I think the government will continue to be prudent. It will try to accumulate a surplus, but it's hard to say with growing expenses that we are facing.
A budget for all Singaporeans and a budget for the future. How do you think the Prime Minister has managed to balance out the short-term priorities and expenditure for Singaporeans with the country's longer-term structural challenges?
I think that in this budget especially, there was a nice balance between catering to the current needs of households right now, whether it is cost of living, education, healthcare, and also with our economic needs, restructuring, training, jobs redesign, for example, and elderly population. So there was a nice balance being struck between the long-term and the immediate needs.
I would agree. I think it's not just an issue about, the SG 60 ang pounds, but basically I think it did check a lot of the boxes for some of the corporate wish lists, in terms of tackling costs and trying to position for the new phase of growth, and also all the concerns for Singaporeans, whether it's from having babies to the elderly, in terms of retirement adequacy and healthcare needs, and of course helping to upskill and uplift the low-wage workers and low-skilled workers. I think it's all there.
Despite all of that money, though, half has gone to social development expenditure for 2024. That was almost at 50%. Your thoughts on that?
Well, we did see basically social spending, rise over the years. So it's not completely surprised. But I think this time around, in this budget, probably there was a greater allocation to some of these, given that it's probably a pre-election budget, and given that there is a lot of uncertainty on the ground, there is concerns about job security and, of course, rising costs of living, etc. So in that sense, I think it is quite timely.
And Dr. Wu, is it timely?
Oh, yes, it is very timely, given the current needs that families face, as I agree with Ms. Ling.
How much wiggle room does Mr. Wong have when it comes to allocating resources, you think?
Well, it depends. I think right now there is some wiggle room because of the surplus that we've got. But going forward, I think the competing needs of different sectors, different parts of society, it will become more urgent, whether it's families, elderly, people with disabilities, businesses. So there will be a lot of needs that we will need to satisfy with the resources that we've got.
Okay, final comments on Budget 2025. Was this year's budget within your expectations? Perhaps, Dr. Wu, we can start with you.
Sure, I think so. I think it was within the expectations in the sense that we thought there would be more support for families, more support for cost of living, and then some, of course. There's some mention of energy, new energy, things that perhaps we were not thinking so closely about, but evidently the government has been thinking quite closely about.
Was there anything that stood out to you, Ms. Ling? Anything that satisfied you or surprised you to begin with?
Well, I think the biggest surprise was the size of the fiscal deficit surplus that they are projecting for FY25. It does suggest that the revenue receipts are going to be very, very healthy this time around. So although we are expecting growth to slow a little bit for 2025 compared to 2024, nevertheless, the GST hikes that were done previously obviously have positioned us in a very good place.
All right, great words. Thank you very much for joining us this evening. And wrapping up his speech, Mr. Wong warns that Singapore should brace for new challenges as global turmoil threatens to worsen. But he points to the fact that it will not be the first time that the nation has had to confront tough external circumstances. This, he says, is what the Singapore story is about. And this year's budget will give Singaporeans confidence on the journey ahead.
It is a budget for the future, tackling immediate challenges while laying the groundwork for a stronger, more resilient tomorrow. It is a budget for all Singaporeans because when Singapore thrives, every citizen benefits. Every Singaporean is supported from birth to old age with more support given to those with less. No one is left behind. Importantly, this is a budget shaped together with all Singaporeans. advancing our Forward Singapore efforts to build the Singapore we want, and empowering each of us to contribute towards our shared future. The road ahead will not be without challenges, but I am confident that our best days lie ahead of us. Together, we can keep Singapore an evergreen oasis of stability, hope, and opportunity for all. So let us move onward together for a better tomorrow. Mr. Speaker, I beg to move.
A budget for all Singaporeans, a promise delivered with benefits to all segments, from the individual, families to businesses. Now, this year's budget is a pivotal one for Singapore as the nation celebrates SG60 and looks forward to writing the next chapter together. As we approach the end of our special coverage on Singapore's Budget 2025, we would like to extend our heartfelt thanks to our guests here, Selina Ling from OCBC and Dr. Woo Jun Jie from the National University of Singapore. And a big thank you also to all of you for joining us this afternoon. We will continue our in-depth look at all the measures announced today later on Singapore Tonight at 10 p.m. But for now, East Asia Tonight is up after this. Goodbye.